Chapter 176, Peaceful Wedding. At the end of Konoha's 37th year, Naoki and Mikoto's wedding was very close to take place. Masahiko thought that he only needed to be a secret guardian from the shadows, he really didn't expect to find him another job. However, one day Tsunade came to the door. "Great-grandpa, I have something to trouble you." Masahiko was startled, his face changed drastically, yet he still tried to pretend to be the shop owner. "What kind of grandpa are you talking about? My name is Hagio Romo, yes, Atsutsuki Hagio Romo." Tsunade rolled her eyes. "Okay grandpa Rikuda-sama, can you do me a favor?" "Damn," Masahiko murmured, then said annoyed, "What do you want from this old man?" Tsunade rolled her eyes and said helplessly, "Naoki and Mikoto's wedding is coming near. I hope you can help carve 2 statues for them." Masahiko scratched his head, he really didn't expect this. But Tsunade's idea was perfect, it will surely be a great gift for the couples. "No problem, leave it to me." "Thank you, great-grandpa." Tsunade turned around to leave, then Masahiko sighed. "Tsunade, when did you find out?" Tsunade turned her head, smiling, "The first time I came to buy sculptures from you, Orochimaru and I discovered it." "Don't worry, we only told sensei, not even Jiraiya." "Did you only tell Hiruzen?" "Thank God Jiraiya didn't figure it out too, or I'll be truly screwed," Masahiko said, then let out a sigh of relief, waved his hand, and sent Tsunade away. "She told Hiruzen of all the people," Masahiko murmured, and shook his head haplessly. "One of the reasons that made me stay here, is to prevent Hiruzen and Danzo from making any small moves. No wonder this year and a half period was so peaceful. Well, I'll just keep being a carver for now." More than half a month passed in a flash. Konoha celebrated the new year for a couple of days. And after just 2 days of calm, the village became lively again. The wedding of Naoki and Mikoto was more influential than what Masahiko imagined. A marriage between the Senju and the Uchiha attracted a lot of people's attention. The arrival of the Land of Fire's daimyo wasn't unexpected for Masahiko, after all, Naoki was also his nephew. But the appearance of the Wind's daimyo accompanied by the 3rd hokage surely surprised him. Of course, there is also the daimyo of the Land of Whirlpools, and the great elder of the Uzumaki clan that is Masahiko's shadow clone. Masahiko has already completed the couple's carving, and they were placed in front of the Senju station. This time, Uchiha Mikoto was marrying a Senju clansman, and of course, the wedding had to be held at the Senju clan. Because the place wasn't big enough, civilians watched from afar. Only Masahiko, as the owner's shop, was the only civilian who could enter because his sculptures have received a lot of praise. Unexpectedly, this has created a great advertisement for the Amazon shop. "Unfortunately, I've decided to go out of business for a while after this wedding. I really need to see the kids' development. After all, the shadow clone isn't as good as the original." Masahiko sighed as he and his shadow clone greeted each other. About an hour before the wedding begins, people from various clans around the world pledged Naoki and Mikoto their gifts, then they were sent to their respective seats. The seats are divided into 2 rows. On the left, the people from the various clans and families, and they are realistically arranged from front to the back according to the strength in the family. They had no problem with this arrangement. And of course, as a civilian, Masahiko sat at the bottom of the row. Next to him are a few civilian ninjas with enough identities to attend the wedding, such as Jiraiya and Orochimaru. "Old stubborn, how did you get in?" Masahiko felt helpless. Both of his identities seemed to have grievances with Jiraiya. Of course, he knew that it just the way Jiraiya acts, otherwise he would have beaten him. "Didn't you see the statue at the door?" Jiraiya shrugged, "I guess you could do a better job." "So what do you think, old man, do you want to make one for Tsunade and me?" Idiot! Before Masahiko could answer, Orochimaru relieved him, and then the 2 quarreled quietly. While speaking, the others gradually sat on their chairs on the right side of the venue. And they were all famous and strong people. For example, sitting in the first place was the strongest shinobi alive, the man who claimed that he had never been defeated, the great elders of the Uzumaki clan, and the witnesser of the world history, everyone's grandpa. Yes, it was Masahiko's shadow clone. The 3 daimyos, followed by the hokage, the hokage, Mito, the elders of Konoha, relatives of Naoki and Mikoto, and so on, were behind him. There must be a host for the wedding, and Masahiko never thought of doing it this time. What the hell? How did Tsunade end up being the host of the wedding? Masahiko murmured, feeling that something wrong was going to happen. As they proceeded with the ceremony, Masahiko always felt a little uneasy. Hiruzen, turn off Konoha's perception alarm temporarily. Masahiko's voice suddenly emitted in Hiruzen's ear. Hiruzen, who was talking to the third hokage, got startled when he heard these words. He quickly glanced at Masahiko's shadow clone, then nodded to the shop owner Masahiko, and waved his hand summoning an umbu. 5 minutes later, Hiruzen nodded again at Masahiko. The latter looked at his shadow clone, then the two simultaneously opened their perception to the maximum, covering Konoha. Nothing unusual. Masahiko breathed a sigh of relief, cancelled his perception, and continued to watch the ceremony. Of course, he has to turn on his perception every 5 minutes to be ready for any surprised attack or interruption. Unexpectedly, the wedding was very peaceful, and Tsunade's hosting was quite satisfactory. The blessing sent by the representatives of various countries and families seemed to be sincere, and there was no bloody dramatic plot from Fugaku to steal the bride. The only two nervous people in the entire wedding were Masahiko and other Masahiko. The wedding wasn't boring. On the contrary, it can be said that it was one of the best, and the scene seemed extremely lively and heartwarming. But Masahiko's mind and spirit were in another place, and he couldn't feel any of it. It wasn't until the wedding was over that Masahiko was taken aback when the two newlyweds thanked everyone for their blessings. It's over? Where's the trouble? What about the Akatsuki? Why didn't anyone try to attack us? Masahiko was left frustrated. All of this was for nothing. You can say that he was really unsatisfied. I'm really getting crazy. Masahiko smiled wryly. It seems that the Akatsuki are not that determined to correct the plot. Maybe I'm giving this matter much more attention than what it deserves. Masahiko sighed inwardly. Forget about it, this is better anyway. The two Masahiko glanced at each other and relaxed. Mikoto is now Naweki's wife. He doesn't believe that the Akatsuki can do anything to make this marriage fail now. The plot changed, and it cannot be revised. So there should be no problem. After all, he has never heard of divorce in Naruto World. Chapter 177, Checking out the progression. After the wedding of Naweki and Mikoto, both Masahiko's identities stayed in Konoha for a week, and the shadow clone accompanied Gensuke to help him get closer to the Land of Fire and the Land of Wind. After all, the Land of Whirlpools is basically becoming one of the 5 major countries in the shinobi world, and that will never be achieved without diplomacy. As for the identity of the Amazon shop owner, he also maintained it for a week, and when he was sure that no accident would happen, he waited for an opportunity and released the shadow clone, and took its place. Nagato and Konan have made great progress during this year and a half. The shadow clone lasted for a year and a half. At first, he had 50% of Masahiko's chakra, but because he lived for an entire year, only 20% remained when the technique was lifted. Also, because it was never cancelled, Masahiko didn't know anything about the Uzumaki for that entire period. At that moment, all the memories the shadow had in that year and a half were transferred to Masahiko, who seemed slightly confused. Fortunately, the shadow clone's life for a year and a half was relatively monotonous, so he could quickly recover. What Masahiko was happiest about is the progress of his two disciples. 9-year-old Nagato already has the strength of a jonin. As long as he keeps the hard work, it's estimated that when he's 14-year-old he will be an S-rank ninja. As for Konan, although she isn't as good as Nagato, she's currently a chunin. And what makes Masahiko even happier is that she's very skilled in making explosion tags. Elder, we should go, Gensuke said. Gensuke, I haven't seen you for almost 2 years, you look a lot older. After all, Gensuke was already 64 years old. We haven't seen each other for 2 years? Gensuke looked blank. They've been seeing each other every day for the last year. Masahiko didn't wait for him to reply, and said, let's go back to the Land of Whirlpools. Only the two of them came, so he wasn't worried about the safety of the country. Everything was arranged correctly by the shadow clone, so it was fine to be relaxed. It was easier to go back than when they came. After all, when they came, they were carrying a lot of sealing scrolls as gifts. Hashirama, your great-grandson may become a ninja who can even surpass you, and I hope that one day you will see it with your own eyes. Masahiko thought to himself. With the combination of the Senju and the Uchiha cells, gods know what kind of monster will be born. However, all the dust has settled, and Masahiko no longer struggles with the plot but looks forward to it. In this way, if I don't work hard, I'm afraid I will be at the risk of being overtaken. Masahiko felt anxious. It would be very shameful for a 100-year-old senior to be overtaken by a much younger generation. Kekkei Mora. The next thing that will easily yield me witness points is Kakashi, who graduated at the age of 5, became a Chunin at the age of 6, and a Jonin at 12. There should be a lot of witness points to get. The plot has changed, Masahiko can only predict things now. These days, he's also trying to figure out what kind of events that will probably be the same as the original, and which will change. During year and a half, Masahiko succeeded to convince Sakumo to change Heitake Kakekura's name back to Heitake Kakashi, because it felt really awkward. Of course, the process wasn't easy, and he even creeped Sakumo out. The latter thought that Masahiko was inexplicably and weirdly interested in his boy. And since he agreed, Sakumo now had to convince his wife, using the same methods. My old mother said that the boy should be named Heitake Kakashi, but you said Kakekuru was a name that had elder Masahiko's approval and blessing. Now you want to change it back. Masahiko felt really sorry for Sakumo, he really missed his life a couple of times. Sensei, you're back. Nagato and Konan voices made him go back to his senses, only to realize this he already returned to the Uzumaki clan, and several people came to greet them at the borders of the land of the whirlpools. You too little, you didn't make that great of progress. Masahiko sensed slightly, then sighed. It seems that the memory of the shadow clone isn't as good as personal experience. Let's go. We're going to the training ground to check your practice. Sensei, didn't you just check before you went to Konoha a week ago? The children resisted a little. Masahiko smiled without explaining, and we will check again, who knows, maybe you've gotten stronger. Masahiko has always felt that his shadow clones are slightly weird. The shadow clone has actually built 2 tracks in the training ground, one for testing 100 meters, and the other for testing 400 meters, and other bodybuilding equipment such as fixed bars for pull-ups, and weights for squats. The scene was a little embarrassing, no wonder the 2 disciples didn't want to do it. The equipment was already available, so it's a pity not to use it. But the moment he saw him, Masahiko had black lines on his face. On the fixed bar, one person was doing flying pull-ups. The guy had it easy that you could even see an after image between each repeat. Oh, sensei! You're back! When he saw Masahiko, he turned around 1080 degrees in the air, threw his body to the front, and landed in front of Masahiko, staggering. Masahiko frowned, and squeezed out a smile. Kanikiro, are you still practicing? Yes, sensei. Kanikiro raised his head. The equipment you've built it too good for practicing. Boom! As soon as he said that, the fixed bar collapsed, and Masahiko sighed helplessly. I built this for Nagato and Konan. What are you doing? If you're that bored, you can go to Konoha. Dae's son is 5 years old now. He will make up a great companion in practice for you. As Kanikiro walked away excitedly, Masahiko's looked a bit depressed. He could sense that Kanikiro's physical strength and stamina already declining. After all, he was over 60, and it's impossible to stay at the peak forever. Now only 2 have left. You will use the 400 meters track. 100 meters isn't enough. We will see how you will do, then we will check you ninjutsu practice. Yes, sensei. The 2 children answered a bit weakly. They always thought it was stupid to run only 100 meters. Of course, the way ninjas run in this world is by putting their hands behind them. Masahiko didn't understand the principle, but he was used to it for so many years. Does this reduce resistance? Seeing the 2 children scoring 7 seconds and 5 seconds, he slightly nodded. At the age of 9, this is actually excellent. After all, it's completely dependent on physical ability. Chakra is not allowed to be used on the track. It's not bad, but there isn't much progress, and the results are about the same as the last test, Masahiko said. Then he realized that the last test was only a week ago. Does the shadow clone affect the memory if used for too long? Masahiko frowned. No one has ever used it for a year and a half, nor there's actually someone who has the right amount of chakra to do it. It seems that I shouldn't be using it for so long in the future. Masahiko turned to the 2 again. The progress is okay, let's see you how your ninjutsu practice is going. Chapter 178, The Explosions Road. Yuna, how is it, have you successfully connected Konan with me? Masahiko asked. Don't get any wrong ideas, this was a serious question. Masahiko hasn't yet reached the point of bullying a 9-year-old girl. After returning to the Uzumaki, Masahiko first tested the practice of the two children. After that, he focused on the Konan's explosion tag's production speed. He was pleasantly surprised to find that Konan could basically make one in a few seconds, which means mass production. However, Konan didn't have the Uzume special chakra. Although she is as strong as a Chunin, the amount of her chakra wasn't enough. Therefore, Masahiko took her to Yuna to see if she could come up with some sort of device to solve this problem. Of course, Masahiko thought of sealing some of his chakra in Konan's body like that time he did to Tsunade during the Jonin exam. But after trying, Konan explosion tag was unstable. After all, it was mixed with Masahiko's chakra. After coming to Yuna, the scientist tried a lot of methods. After collecting Masahiko and Konan's chakra samples, she was able to use some equipment to convert Masahiko's chakra into Konan as a raw chakra. In fact, Masahiko couldn't tell what exactly was happening. This was like the chakra bracelet. Another big black technology has emerged. Grandpa Masahiko, it's connected, Yuna replied. Now, you need to try and output a little amount of chakra. Masahiko did what she said, and Konan, on the opposite side, suddenly looked uncomfortable. Masahiko was taken aback and stopped it quickly. Yuna, what's going on? Did it fail? Yuna smiled and walked over. It's successful, Grandpa Masahiko. But Konan's chakra is worn out now. It will be a little uncomfortable for her to receive your chakra, but that's okay, it will be good for her. Masahiko, who got startled, nodded in understanding, then smiled. In this way, Konan's chakra volume may improve. This is an unexpected gain. But Grandpa, Yuna continued, after the transformation, you will probably lose 50%. Masahiko waved his hand and interrupted Yuna's words, it doesn't matter. This is normal. Then turned to Konan, little Konan, it's okay. Get used to it first, and then we will start making explosion tags. It's okay, sensei. In the next 2 months, Masahiko came with Konan every day to make explosion tags, until Yuriko came to stop him. Sensei, Yuriko looked helpless, you've made nearly 10 million explosion tags. Each Uzumaki ninja can get thousands of them, there's no need to make more. Masahiko was stunned. Only then he realized that the 2 months of their hard work had achieved such great results. Looking at the Konan and smiled at her, Konan was excited, but he still noticed how exhausted she was. Let's stop here for the time being. You did a great job, little girl. But your hard work has not been in vain. Your chakra volume has basically doubled, and this isn't a small gain. Konan nodded, smiling, then went to rest. Masahiko didn't feel tired. After receiving his sage body, he never felt tired again. Yuriko, since there are too many explosion tags, we better find a way to sell some. This was Masahiko's real goal. The country's current source of income is the Land of Thunder, but it cannot always rely on the protection fees for prospering, and they must come up with their own source of income. Explosion tags don't weigh much, and it is suitable for sale. As for to whom they should be selling, the Land of Thunder probably has no spare money to buy, and the Land of Water is a little too close to the Land of the Whirlpools, so it will be the Land of Fire, then Land of Wind, and the Land of Earth. As for those small countries, Masahiko doesn't expect them to have the money to buy in large quantities. But how to sell is a hassle. It's easy in Konoha's case, the two villages are so close to each other, and they have a great relationship. But Iwagakure and Sunagakure are not only too far away, but there are many countries between them as well, which will make them prone to danger. Yuriko was the one who raised these questions, and after a long time, Masahiko came up with an idea. What if we go from the sea? In the past few years, the Land of the Whirlpool has developed rapidly, and they already have ships capable of sailing. The sea? Yuriko was taken aback, you can only reach the Land of Water from the sea, right? Masahiko frowned. He hadn't paid attention to whether Naruto World was round or not. If he could reach Iwagakure from the sea, going to Sunagakure will also be safer. I'll go out, Masahiko said, then flew toward the southeast of the Land of the Whirlpools. It is very important to know that when Masahiko extended the Uzumaki territory last time using the sea, it was only a short distance compared to the vast sea he's watching in front of him. Otherwise, it would have taken him at least a year. Watching the endless sea in front of him, Masahiko directly across it. This distance after half an hour, Masahiko frowned, watching the ocean in front of him. At this speed, he must have already crossed about 200 kilometers. Is it this far? After another half an hour, Masahiko finally discovered the continent, but not the new continent. Is this really the land of Earth? Are you telling me that the world of Naruto is also rounded? Masahiko let out a sigh of relief. It will take about half a month to get here from the Uzumaki side, which is similar to the transportation on land, but the sea is much safer. Masahiko didn't go to the land of Earth to visit. His shadow clone had already lifted when he was looking for Yuna before. And he wasn't in the mood to find Onaki and relieve the past, so he directly turned and head back. But this time, his speed isn't fast. Every few minutes, he had to stop and use the earth release to erect a stone monument up to 100 meters high, in order to prevent the people sailing at sea from losing their way. It wasn't until the sky was completely dimmed that Masahiko returned to the land of the whirlpools, and excitedly went to find Yuriko. Yuriko, this world is really round. Yuriko was taken aback, but she didn't understand what it meant. Masahiko explained, from now on, if we sail from the southeast for the land of Whirlpool, in about half a month, we will be able to reach the land of Earth. We can also release mission in our village to allow the ninja to escort the explosion tags shipments. After thinking about it, Masahiko added, this task will be classified as an S level. At least 2 elites must be leading the team. After all, there may be unexpected situations in the sea. Yuriko nodded, then we will have to negotiate with Iwagakure. Masahiko smiled, the first time I will go with the ship, I haven't sailed in the sea for a long time. I marked the route so that the tribe would not lose their way. This route will be called the Silk Well, the Explosions Road. Nodding, Masahiko felt very satisfied with his naming ability. Chapter 179, Sailing to Onaki. Raise slowly, be careful. At the beach of Uzumaki, Yuriko commanded a group of ninja nervously, loading boxes one by one into the ship's cargo warehouse. There are a total of 50 boxed, and each contains 10 sealing scrolls, and each seal scroll stores 1,000 explosion tags. This is already the limit. It's not like they couldn't store more, but in that case, the package will definitely worth more than the goods, and they will lose money. Masahiko took the 2 disciples to watch. It has been more than a month since he founded the Explosions Road, and the deal with Konoha has also been concluded. Konoha, who had won the 2 wars, have really prospered. They bought 1.5 explosion tags from Masahiko at once, which cost them 100 Asuma heads. After Konoha is sold out, there were still a lot of explosion tags in the Uzumaki clan. Masahiko wanted to ship it out to the other countries. But he feared that this might encourage them to go to war. If he sells too much, he might even cause problems to Konoha, so he finally decided to go to the land of Earth and sell them only 500,000 explosion tags. Earn money without causing any troubles. After all, this is the first time for the Uzumaki to take the Explosions Road. To avoid accidents, Masahiko took half of the elite patrol team and his 2 disciples, preparing for the Naruto World Big Tour. Everything was ready. Masahiko waved his hand to Yuriko, who was standing there, nodded, then turned and directly gave the others a signal to start rowing. That's right, they're paddling. Masahiko originally thought that they would have better ships in these 2 years, but that was only normal since they didn't need ships until now. Of course, it's not completely primitive. For example, the oars are very advanced and can be channeled with chakra. It still feels very slow. Masahiko sighed. Masahiko's first and possibly only voyage in Naruto World has begun. After all, he could fly. Masahiko had been on a boat in his previous life, and he also has seen the endless ocean before. Compared with the modern world, the sea in Naruto World is insignificant. Apart from pointing for them the directions, he had nothing else to do. However, the ninjas on the boat were a little bit more excited, especially his 2 disciples. After all, they are only 9 years old. They were still in a playful age. They practiced daily, but the battle wasn't suitable for training, and Masahiko wasn't harsh enough to let them run and follow the boat on the sea. The 2 watched the fishes jumping from time to time from the water and laughed. In the beginning, Masahiko was still somewhat energetic, but after 2 days, it became a little unbearable for him and felt that life on a ship was really boring. It would be great if a Sea King could attack the ship and relieve the boredom. Masahiko smiled bitterly, a Sea King would never appear in Naruto World. A huge strange fish suddenly emerged from the seal and set off a colossal wave. Is there really a Sea King? No, it's some kind of a summoning beast. Smiling bitterly, Masahiko used the gravity force to stabilize the ship. Nagato, Konan, this is your chance to try out your ninjutsu. Masahiko stopped the elite patrol team from attacking, and let his two disciples face it. Wind release, vacuum wave, paper rain. The two disciples shot simultaneously, but their ninjutsu didn't cause enough damage to the huge monster fish. Very powerful summoning beast. The two fought on the water's surface, and Masahiko kept stabilizing the boat and watching with the others. However, this strange fish was strong, and the two kids couldn't finish it off. Masahiko frowned. Leaving such a thing here might cause some trouble for future shipments. Masahiko drew his right hand into a pistol gesture, and a small Bijutama suddenly went flying, blowing that fish. Looking at the two disciples who were depressed, Masahiko smiled and said, "Don't worry, you still can't use a powerful ninjutsu like this. You will be able to deal with such a thing in 2 years." The fleet continued to sail, but encountered several giant summoning beasts along the way. None of them were worthy of a contract, and they all were destroyed by Masahiko. No matter what is the world, there will always be some unknown danger in the vast sea, Masahiko said. It seems that in the future, he must carefully pick a team to escort each shipment. I wonder if the Uzumaki will have someone who will conquer the sea in the future. It would be nice if I hear him say, "I'm gonna be the Pirate King." Masahiko laughed. The estimated 15-day voyage took 17. The first shipment encountered a lot of problems, but it was not too dangerous for ninjas, and finally, they arrived smoothly in the land. "Elder, shall we carry these boxes to Iwagakure?" Masahiko glared at the idiot ninja, who asked this question. A group of elite ninjas from the Uzumaki carrying boxes to sell them to Iwagakure, how shameful. Masahiko sensed a little bit, located the direction of Iwagakure, then with one hand sign. Dust release, detachment of the primitive world technique. The white crystal beam came out from Masahiko's hand, across the sky, reaching the far clouds above Iwagakure. The civilians and the ninjas of the village thought that it was a strange celestial phenomenon, only Onaki looked like he saw a ghost. "This is dust release." Looking in the direction of the incoming message, he flew out quickly, then several Iwagakure Umbu also looked at each other and followed him. After releasing the dust release, Masahiko landed on the ground and waited. Sure enough, after a while, he felt Onaki's chakra approaching quickly. "Elder Uzumaki Masahiko, what made you come here?" After he arrived, Onaki frowned, looking at the ship behind Masahiko, and tried to guess the purpose of his sudden visit. "Don't be nervous. I've come carrying goods this time." Masahiko waved his hand and said with a smile. At the same time, several Umbu appeared beside Onaki. Onaki signaled them not to act rashly and waited for Masahiko's explanation. "I've told you, you don't need to be nervous," Masahiko said, but didn't rush to talk about business. "Onaki, I haven't seen you in about 30 years, do you remember last time we met?" Onaki hesitated, relaxed his vigilance, smiled bitterly, and shook his head. "Elder, can we jump right into the main subject?" Masahiko paused. He remembered then that Onaki's visit to Konoha wasn't a fond memory. Masahiko sighed, "Let's talk business then." Masahiko pointed to the ship behind him and started talking. Chapter 180, Forming a Team. The process of selling explosion tags was unexpectedly smooth. When Masahiko explained everything to Onaki, the latter immediately ordered dozens of ninja to carry the shipment to the village and check it out. After the deal's conclusion, Masahiko didn't want to remind Onaki of that incident again, so he only asked him to build a seaport on the coast, since the Uzumaki may send more fleets to sell various things in the land of Earth from time to time. After that, the clansmen gathered their things and embarked on their journey home. The journey back was obviously much smoother. After all, the ninjas already had 17 days of sailing experience, and the giant summons beasts had also been cleaned up before. After only 14 days, they returned to the land of the whirlpools. In the following days, Masahiko also used the same method to establish a route to Sunagakure. Although it takes about the same time to travel on land, it's relatively safer. Dealing with the summon beasts is always better than dealing with cunning ninja. In less than a year, the land of whirlpools successfully established trade treaties with many large and small countries in the shinobi world, not only for selling but also for buying. After solving the problem with the economic sources of the Uzumaki, Masahiko was idle again. He kept teaching the two kids every day, helping Kushina with her sealing techniques and practicing the gentle fist on the way. At this time, the LV9 experience bar had passed the half by a little bit, and Masahiko estimated that in 5 or 6 years, he would be able to successfully achieve the first LV10 skill by training. The training of the two disciples has also reached a bottleneck. At their age, I'm afraid it's already at the limit. Masahiko decided to take them out to do tasks and gain some practical experience. There are not many missions in the Uzumaki village, and the difficulty isn't very serious. After doing a few messy escort tasks, and some daily missions, not only that Masahiko felt bored, even the two children felt that it was useless to continue. Let's go, I'll take you to Konoha to take a mission. This was perfect. It was Konoha's 39th year, and Kakashi was about to enter the school at the age of 5, and Masahiko was hoping he's gonna witness something. The teams in Konoha are usually formed from 3, or 3 plus a leader, and Masahiko plans on forming one. Kushina has been away from Konoha for 2.5 years, so she and Masahiko's two disciples formed a small team. Nanako didn't object to Kushina's trip to Konoha this time, and Masahiko has even offered her to go with them. If you don't want to be the first lady for a while, why don't you go to Konoha with us and have fun? Nanako smiled bitterly and shook her head without explaining. Finally, a group of 5 people went to Konoha again. Kushina, are you happy that you're going to see Minato soon? Masahiko laughed. Kushina, with red cheeks, shook her head gently. But her eyes revealed her real thoughts. Minato has even begged me to make a wooden sculpture of you. Masahiko continued to tease. As he spoke, Masahiko's expression became a little serious. This time, I will take the 3 of you to Konoha. The main purpose is to train your actual combat ability, so I will let Hiruzen carefully select some A-class missions for you, but I will not take it easy on you. You have to deal with this matter seriously. Don't worry, Grandpa, I will take good care of them. Kushina clenched her fist. Masahiko glanced at her, shook his head, then clashed back, you're not stronger than Nagato, so you might be the one that will need protection. How is this possible? Nanako could only watch with a wry smile. Reaching Konoha, a little kid passed by them running. 17 remaining. The corner of Masahiko's mouth twitched. It was Guy, who was just 5 years old. Masahiko shouldn't be surprised to see that he has already started exercising at a young age, but the things he was carrying on his back is the thing he didn't expect. Ichiraku's takeaways? There's always a surprising thing every time I come to Konoha. Delivering food at the age of 5 isn't easy. Masahiko smiled bitterly. He didn't expect to leave Konoha for less than a year, to find that Toki has already gathered enough money to start working on his takeaway project. Wait, no. Masahiko has already guessed what happened, and later it was proved to be correct. Not only Guy but Dai and Kanikiro also joined. The 3 of them took this as a practice and started delivering free takeaways for Toki. Sensei, Kanikiro hasn't changed at all, Nanako teased. Masahiko sighed, it's my fault. Looking at the 2 little disciples again, he was slightly relieved. Both of them are somewhat introverted, but they will never grow up to be like him. Although he felt a little embarrassed, Masahiko didn't stop them, since the 3 seemed to be enjoying it. Nanako went to find Mito in the Senjo station, while Masahiko took the 3 children to the hokage building. When Hiruzen saw Kushina, the joy on his face couldn't be concealed. In the past 2 years, Masahiko kept her in the Uzumaki clan. And Hiruzen was very worried about the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. However, when he noticed how Masahiko was glaring at him, he quickly tried to hide it. Elder Masahiko, how can I help you? Uzumaki village is very poor. So I brought these 3 to Konoha to pick up some tasks. Hiruzen was startled and smiled bitterly. Not long ago, Masahiko emptied half of Konoha's treasury selling them explosion tags, and now he's saying the village is poor, but Hiruzen learned not to push his luck too much with Masahiko. No problem, Elder Masahiko, do you want me to pick a Chunin to lead these 3? Masahiko was startled and shook his head, I brought them here to take on some tasks above a class, and you want a Chunin to lead the team? A class? Hiruzen showed a slightly embarrassed look. There are not many tasks like this in Konoha. He initially thought that Masahiko was just taking these children to do some B and C class missions. Don't worry, I just want to train them. One mission every 6 months is enough, and you can take half of the commission of the mission. Hiruzen breathed a sigh of relief. One mission in half a year is fine, so you can keep the commission. Masahiko didn't refuse, then it's settled. In a few days, I will bring the children again to take on the mission. It's best to have a task that involves a lot of battles but not much time. Hiruzen nodded in agreement. Masahiko left with the 3 children, then glanced at Kushina with a smile. Okay, it's okay to go to Minato. You don't have to be this anxious. Kushina suddenly arrogantly replied, I'm not going to see him, I'm going to find Grandma. Then she hurriedly ran away, but the direction was obviously wrong. Masahiko turned around, looked at Nagato and Konan, and said with a smile, we're going to. Let's see how your brother Naoki's life after marriage. Chapter 181, Increasing the Difficulty. In the Senju clan, Masahiko was disappointed after he didn't get the news he was looking for. It has been nearly a year since Naoki and Mikoto got married, but Mikoto still shows no signs of pregnancy, and the monster Masahiko was expecting is nowhere in sight. Itaki and Suzuki were born from Mikoto in the original, which proves that she should be fine. It's not Naoki, right? Masahiko was anxious. Great-grandpa, hey, raise your tea. This was Mikoto. After she married Naoki, she also started calling him great-grandpa. Masahiko nodded, and then glanced at Naoki playing with Nagato and Konan, and felt that the scene was a bit familiar. At the beginning, it was the same with me and Hashirama. Mito's voice that came from the side startled Masahiko. Naoki and Hashirama are really similar, regardless of their appearance or character. Masahiko sighed, and Mito nodded with a smile. The quiet days didn't last long as Masahiko ended up another new year in Konoha. It was Konoha's 9th year. As soon as the new year passed, Masahiko took the 3 children and found Hiruzen, but the result wasn't very satisfactory. There's no class missions? Masahiko looked annoyed. Hiruzen smiled bitterly, Elder Masahiko, the new year has just passed, we have only received a few missions, and not a single one of them is in a class mission. Then do you have any from last year? Hiruzen shook his head, the missions now are lesser than the number of ninjas. Masahiko was taken aback. Konoha is really much stronger than the original. Why don't you wait for another 2 months? Hiruzen asked. Masahiko hesitated, then shook his head. After 2 months, it will be the time for Kakashi to enroll, and he's afraid of missing it. Although he can use a shadow clone, he always feels that it's more troublesome than the main body, so he doesn't want to use if not needed. What about the Umbu? For example, investigating other ninja villages? Hiruzen was taken aback. Yes, but there are some missions. But this kind of tasks is not suitable. It's okay, you won't mind as long as I'm leading the team, right? Hiruzen smiled bitterly, and wanted to say, it's because you're the leader I don't feel at ease. In the end, Masahiko picked up an investigating mission for the 3 children. It's rumored that Kusagakur has came in a contact with Sungakur recently. I don't seem to have taught you how to detect and collect information, right? Masahiko realized on the way to Kusagakur with 3 children. It seems not, sensei. Nagato replied. Well, it's not too late to learn. Listen you guys, Masahiko just wanted to say something, but realized that he wasn't also good at investigating and collecting information. Well, I never thought I would need it either. Masahiko glanced at the 3 children who looked eager to learn, and sighed helplessly. He can't tell them now that he doesn't know either, right? Okay, you will have to find a patrol team, then attack them, use the transformation technique to change to their appearance, then mix in and investigate. Masahiko started spurting words indiscriminately, and came up with this plan. He won't be far away so he could protect them, and nothing will happen anyway. Nagato and Konan kept nodding again and again, but the 15-year-old Kushina didn't buy a single word of that. She rolled her eyes secretly and whispered, so we're gonna have to rely on ourselves. Masahiko heard it, felt so embarrassed, but he still pretended that he didn't hear it. All the way through Masahiko kept randomly teaching them things, and when they came to place about 5 kilometers away from Kusagakur, Masahiko glanced at the surrounding environment, then confessed, the rest from here is up to you, I will go first. Then he sank underground. The three of them glanced at each other, then big sister Kushina waved her hand, follow me and be careful. The three of them quickly concealed their appearance and moved forward. About 3 kilometers later, Kushina ordered them to hide and find a patrolling team. Sister Kushina, shall we do it? Nagato said naively. Kana pulled her sleeve, no, I feel that something is wrong with sensei's approach. Underground, Masahiko's mouth twitched slightly. Kushina glanced at Konan, feeling amazed of how smart she is, and craftily observed the patrolling team. They seem to be carrying something. Masahiko's disciples also observed carefully when they heard this. Nagato then hesitated and said, it looks exactly like the box we shipped last time by sea. Kushina was taken aback at first, then she looked happy. Oh! So Kusagakur and Tsunagakur came in contact, because the latters are reselling the explosion tags? Mission complete guys, we can go back. Nagato and Kushina hesitated, nodded to each other, then prepared to leave. Masahiko underground sighed. He didn't expect such a coincidence. How could this be in a class mission? This is more like D class. No, these guys didn't learn a thing, we can't just go back like this. I have to make it more difficult for them. Masahiko concentrated, and a stone floated and hit one of the Kusagakur ninja patrol on the forehead. Who? When he shouted, the three children got nervous and immediately exposed themselves. Sister Kushina, how did they find us? I don't know, let's run. Masahiko smiled, who said he can't be an umbu, he's really doing a great job. He then followed them. As for the Kusagakur's ninjas that were chasing, they were 1 upper ninja, 3 middle ninjas, and 6 lower ninjas. This lineup, Masahiko nodded, they should be evenly matched, I won't need to intervene. Sure enough, the 3 children were still caught up. After all, they were still young. Although their ninjutsu skills were very good, their physical strength was still not as good as an adult ninja. With that, a fierce battle erupted. As Masahiko expected, the strength of the two sides was similar. The Kwagakur ninja weren't in a hurry to engage. After all, their village was close, and backup will arrive soon, so they even tried to buy some time by talking. These 3 little brats, it looks like they're from the Uzumaki, why are they trying to sneak in? To Masahiko's relief, the 3 children noticed how the other were trying to buy time, and didn't talk nonsense with them. Fire release, great fire annihilation. Nagato used this large-scale fire release attack very skillfully. Kushina showed her elder sister's material, and defeated the upper-level ninja. Although Nagato didn't have any actual combat experience, he was still a lot stronger than any of the Kusagakur shinobi, and with Konan assistance, he quickly gained the upper hand. The fight lasted for 10 minutes. Kusagakur's shinobi had been wiped out, and even when the 3 children were wounded, Masahiko resisted and didn't make a move. However, the people inside the village noticed what's going on outside, and sent some ninjas, who were quickly approaching. Masahiko frowned underground, and whispered, it's almost done. Attentively, the last 4 ninjas from Kusagakur crushed on the ground. Masahiko's team successfully defeated the patrol team. The 3 children froze for a moment, then quickly reacted and fled in Konoha's direction. Masahiko was also responsible for adding a little chaos to the ninjas approaching the scene and added some roadblocks on the way. In the end, the task that was forcibly increased in difficulty by Masahiko, this time was successfully completed by the 3 children. Chapter 182, the 39th Enrollment. Konoha Hospital. Masahiko smiled, looking at the 3 wounded children, and said, now you know that going out to do missions is not easy, right? Accidents may happen anytime, anywhere. There shouldn't have been any accidents. Kushina gritted her teeth. It was evident that Masahiko is the one who exposed their disguise. If it were anyone else, she would have turned on her red pepper mode. Nagato and Konan overlooked that and felt sad. It's all my fault, I must have been not hiding well, and exposed us to the Kusagakur's ninjas. The 2 said in unison. Masahiko and Kushina looked at each other and shrugged helplessly. The 2 kids felt guilty. In fact, the 3 weren't seriously injured. And since Masahiko was watching them, nothing wrong would have happened. It was only some bruises and scratches. Masahiko didn't even need to summon the slugs, Konan could treat them. But to be on the safe side, he brought them to the hospital. Let's go. After the treatment was over, Masahiko left the hospital with the 3 children. Your job is finished now, I will go to Hiruzen to ask for the commission, you guys go and rest, we will continue our training tomorrow. The 3 split into 2 directions and left. The 2 disciples returned to the Senjo station, and Kushina went to find Minato. The latter was very busy during this period. Although there were no tasks, Masahiko heard that he was undergoing a tough training. Although it's possible that he was learning the Flying Thunder God, Masahiko didn't rush to watch. Even if he's a genius, it will take him at least a year and a half. Moreover, Masahiko couldn't give him any guidance in this regard, so it would be useless to go. Elder Masahiko, can you sell the explosion tags only to us in the future? After handing over the task, Hiruzen hesitated for a moment, then asked. Masahiko smiled, exposing his negotiable expression. Hiruzen looked happy until Masahiko said, nice try. Masahiko, who went out, shook his head helplessly. He knew that they might complain about selling the explosion tags to other countries, but he couldn't help it. He couldn't make the Uzumaki lose its essential economic source for the sake of allies. The explosion tags made by Konan were the perfect source, it costs nothing. Well, it cost her some chakra, but that's fine. On Konoha Street, Masahiko hesitated for a while, and instead of returning to the Senjo station, he used the transformation technique and went straight to Ichiraku Ramen. Toke, I haven't seen you for a long time, did you really find someone to deliver the takeaways? Toke smiled the moment he saw Masahiko. Boss Hago Romo, you're back. Thank you for the advice, the business is better now than ever. Masahiko nodded and looked into the shop. There was also a female bustling around, with a 1 or 2-year-old girl behind her back. You took the whole family to battle? Yes, I can't do it alone, so ask my wife to help me. Masahiko nodded, then was taken aback by a small kid who ran suddenly behind him. Boss, I already delivered the ramen to Nara's house, where is the next one? Guy, who isn't 6 years old yet said. Nara's house? Masahiko was startled, he's delivering to the entire clan? Who thought that my advice would make Toki rich? This has become more like Ichiraku's consortium. Masahiko smiled at Toki, don't forget to take care of my business when you get rich. Sure. He's definitely becoming rich. Masahiko murmured and walked to his Amazon store. Because his identity got exposed, Masahiko simply asked Toki to put an eye on his shop for a year. There was still a lot of dust, and what's the matter with these letters? Masahiko picked up a few and took a look, only to find that it was pre-orders. Because the shop was closed, Toki stuffed here. Sure enough, the Amazon shop is on fire because of Nawaki and Mikado's wood carving. Each piece of these papers is worth 1 million ryo. There are 300 to 400 here. Are there this much of rich people in Konoha? However, after reading more, Masahiko realized that things weren't as he expected. Only a few wanted to buy, and most of the other letters were the people who already ordered, urging him to finish the job. These people are really impatient, people should learn how to respect Rikudo-sama. In the following days, Masahiko used the transformation technique to complete the orders during the daytime, and in the evening, he will return to the Senjo station in his original appearance to assign some training tasks to the 3 children. It took Masahiko a month before he could complete all the orders and commissioned a takeaway from Ichiraku Ramen to deliver his figures. In total, he earned more than 300 million ryo, which isn't a small sum for Masahiko. Of course, he could earn more from the casino, but it may cause riots. The job of 1 year was finished by Masahiko in a month, and the shop became half dead again, and it's expected to remain half dead. Because all the people who could afford Masahiko's figures have already bought one from him, and I'm afraid there will be no one in a short time. Masahiko wondered what kind of products or services he could add to the store when news suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Konoha Academy is about to enroll for the 39th time. The importance of this year's enrollment is second only to the time when they were picking the second hokage. Because when Masahiko thought about it, it wasn't only Kakashi, all the infamous teachers were getting to school this year. Besides, Masahiko also wanted to take a look at the current Ninja Academy and see what kind of reforms Hiruzen has issued. It's said that students now need to pass the 3 tests of basic ninjutsu. The ability to refine chakra is important, but it isn't enough anymore. He had to do so because Konoha has an increasing population. Moreover, in recent years, the original September admission was changed to March. It felt a bit awkward to Masahiko at first, but later, he realized that a thing related to memories from his previous life. Masahiko estimated that everyone here thinks that it's better to start school soon after the new year. Walking around the academy, he found a red flyer there, explaining in detail the registration time and the test time, and some children were already there with their parents to sign up. For a while, Masahiko stayed there and saw a few familiar faces, but some of them he couldn't remember what they were called. Many people, no wonder Hiruzen, issued those reforms. Masahiko remembers that there were only 30 students in the first year of Konoha Academy. The assessment will be on the 20th of February. Masahiko nodded. Well, let's hope that these kids will put up a good show when the day of the assessment comes. Chapter 183, Canon. Time flies, 2 days passed in the blink of an eye, and the 39th enrollment exam of Konoha Academy began. Masahiko didn't participate personally and stood beside Sakumo as a bystander. The test is divided into 3 sessions. The easiest one was ninjutsu. It's all about how efficient you are at refining chakra. Of course, if you want to get a high score, you must be able to use the 3 basic techniques proficiently, which is very difficult for children. Taijutsu is a pure physical skill assessment. Male and female candidates have different standards, and for boys, they were more stringent. Genjutsu is the illusion assessment. Of course, none of the kids would be asked to use genjutsu. This test was all about their ability to resist genjutsu. Sakumo, what is the qualification for the assessment? Masahiko generally understood the concept of the assessments but didn't know the specific scoring criteria. The highest is 10, the average is 5, Sakumo replied. Masahiko nodded, and what if the candidate is particularly outstanding in one aspect? Masahiko thought of Guy. If you score 10 points in one test, you can ignore the others. Masahiko breathed a sigh of relief and felt that Guy should be fine. But it's difficult to get a full score. Sakumo added, Kakashi probably would only get 10 points in ninjutsu, and maybe 9 or even 8 in the other 2. Masahiko frowned. Since childhood, Kakashi, who had been trained by Sakumo, should have better physical skills than Guy, yet he doesn't expect him to get full marks. Is it this strict? Sakumo nodded, the hokage-sama is hopeless. There are too many candidates. This time more than 150 children signed up, and he's hoping that only 60 people will pass. Masahiko nodded in understanding. He knew in his heart that those children will always get a second chance. The oldest entry age for the academy is 9 years old, and now many children are just over 5 years old. Of course, all of the 5-year-olds are obviously very self-confident. Sakumo, where's your baby? The students have entered the arena one after another, but Masahiko didn't see Kakashi. Kakashi will be the last one to take the test. Sakumo's face seemed stiff. Like father like son, so he loves to show up too? Masahiko laughed and teased. Alright. Sakumo grew up dealing with Masahiko, and it seems like the latter's teasing doesn't work on him anymore. Masahiko looked at the children who were at the forefront. As expected, there were no familiar faces. It seems that the stronger children were ranked behind. The 3 examiners were, Nara Patriarch for the ninjutsu test, Hyuga Patriarch for the taijutsu, and Uchiha Kagami for the genjutsu. Masahiko thought for a while. If something like genjutsu is misused, it may greatly impact the future of these kids. At this time, Konoha's strongest genjutsu user should be Uchiha Kagami. Sure enough, it's rigorous. These 3 examiners look scary. Masahiko muttered. However, the genjutsu he found most difficult was easily passed by the children. None of them seemed to have been trapped inside genjutsu for a long time. Still, none managed to get a high score. Why does Kagami seem to be letting them pass? Sakumo hesitated for a moment and came over quietly. I heard that the elder's daughter-in-law seems to be pregnant. He should be in a good mood. Masahiko gave him a smile. When did you become a gossip person? Wait, Kagami's grandson? Masahiko was startled. Isn't that should be Uchiha Shisui? What wrong, Elder Masahiko? And nothing. Usually, the birth of one more kid isn't that great of news, but those eyes are the things Masahiko was more concerned about. Masahiko pondered for a while, then he came back to his sense after a time to watch the test. The children in the top ranks weren't good, after all. Although they didn't do too bad, Masahiko estimated that they wouldn't pass. So, who will be the first canon kid? Masahiko was excited. After half a minute. It turned out to be Guy. Masahiko couldn't laugh or cry. I should have thought of what to expect. Is he Dai's son? Sakumo asked. Different from the original, Sakumo knew the taijutsu proficient Mato Dai. Masahiko nodded with a smile. Sakumo hesitated, knowing how difficult the assessment is, he won't be able to pass this way. Masahiko waved his hand, it's okay, he will do it. Masahiko couldn't remember anything about Guy failing to enter the academy in the original. And he also knew that he and Kakashi will join in the same year, so he felt that it would be impossible for him not to pass. Sakumo hesitated for a moment but said nothing. 10 minutes later, Masahiko's mouth twitched. Although he didn't know his score, Guy will never pass this exam unless the examiner fell asleep. He will be fine. Masahiko didn't like to be proven wrong. After him, another familiar face entered the scene. Masahiko temporarily put aside his attention to Guy's score. This guy, I think it should be Ibiki Marino, but he doesn't have that scar yet. This is Ebisu? Konohamaru-sensei, is he also in this batch? Gekko Hayate, and Yujiro Uzuki, this pair is also joining this year. The one holding the straw stick should be Genma Shiranui, the one who loves to complain. Rin Nohara. Speaking of Rin, that's Obito over there, this is the first time I see him. Kurane Yui, so she only managed to pass the Genjutsu test? Still, she's the first one to get a perfect score. The living 35 million Ryo, Asuma. As the candidates took the tests, Masahiko kept recalling the familiar character one after another. In addition to them, there were also a few children who were familiar but couldn't name. But there are at least 13 or 14 canon characters that Masahiko remembers from the original. As for Hayate Kakashi, he entered the field with a small sword, and the Ninja Academy entrance exam that lasted for a full day came to an end. Kakashi's 3 basic ninjutsu were perfect, the best so far, and he got his full mark, but he didn't pass the ninjutsu test first. Instead, he took the other 2 tests, but he failed to pass them with full marks, making him look a little disappointed. Masahiko hesitated for a moment, turned to Sakumo, and asked a question that had troubled him for a century: why is Kakashi wearing a mask? Because he's insanely handsome. Sakumo turned around and left. Masahiko, who was stunned for a while, finally remembered Toki and his daughter's reaction when they saw Kakashi's face in the original. Chapter 184, Orochimaru's Request. Guy really hasn't passed the exam? Masahiko was surprised as he looked at the assessment report in Kagami's hand. Kagami smiled bitterly, I've tried my best to help him and even gave him 5 points, but he only scored 2 points in the ninjutsu test. Masahiko sighed, looked at Sakumo next to him, and shook his head helplessly. Forget it. Hiruzen will eventually see his potential in taijutsu, and will specially recruit him to school, right? Masahiko said, but he wasn't too sure. Looking at Sakumo and Kagami, both also seemed not sure. Masahiko's heart moved at that moment. Okay, if Hiruzen ended up rejecting him, I will take him back to the Uzumaki with me. Elder Masahiko. Hiruzen's voice came from behind. He didn't believe Masahiko hadn't noticed his arrival. But it seems he was talking about him. What a coincidence, Hiruzen. Masahiko turned with a smile. Hiruzen smiled bitterly, yes, it is. I know all about Dai's son. Don't worry, Elder Masahiko. That's good. 2 days later, Masahiko accompanied Mato Dai and his son to see the admission list of the academy, but Guy's name wasn't there. Masahiko gritted his teeth quite a bit, I shouldn't have trusted you, it seems that I will really have to take Guy back with me to the Uzumaki. But this scene is quite interesting. Masahiko murmured, watching Guy, who was riding on Dai's shoulder weeping bitterly, and Dai's face being washed with tears. It's okay, son. You still have a chance before the final enrollment time. Yes. After that, the two, father and son, held each other tightly, crying bitterly and shouting youth. Masahiko stepped disgustedly, letting the two have their moment. Kanikiro is nothing like this, these two are really on another level. The onlookers around made Masahiko a little uncomfortable, he slowly took his distance and quickly walked away. What is Hiruzen trying to do? Does he want to see Guy's potential? Masahiko guessed. It did have some effects. Guy, who failed the assessment, was more enthusiastic in training than ever. Masahiko didn't bother to pay more attention to this. Sure enough, the day before the official opening of the academy, Guy received an alternate admission notice. Alternate admission? Masahiko frowned. Is there such a thing in the original? In short, Guy eventually became Kakashi's classmate. Simultaneously, as the freshmen started their fist lesson, Masahiko went to their class, thinking that if he stayed a little bit, their teacher would start calling their name, and he will see how many characters he knows. Masahiko was very surprised by the selection of the teacher. It was actually Kato Dan. This must be somewhat different from the original because Dan should have been dead at this time. During the call, a slightly familiar little girl made Masahiko understand why Kato Dan was selected as their teacher. Shizune? So she was also Kakashi's classmate. And Kato selected this class because of his niece? In addition to her, Masahiko has heard several familiar names, such as Yamashiro Aoba, etc. Although he can't remember where these people appeared in the original, he must have heard their names before. This time watching the enrollment also yield Masahiko unexpected gain. He earned more than 70 witness points. Kakashi brought him 10 points, Guy, Asuma, Kurane, brought him 5 points each. There are also a bunch of 3 and 2 points, which should be divided according to the importance of these people in the original. It seems that I have lost a lot of witness points over the years. For example, when the legendary Sunin enrolled in school, I must have lost 30 points at once. Masahiko felt an intense headache. From now on, he decided to come here to watch every year. Konoha's 39th Ninja Academy's little incident came to an end. Masahiko had nothing to do, and he began to consider the reopening of the Amazon shop. Unexpectedly, 2 people came to find him. What's happened? Why are Tsunade and Orochimaru together? It would be fine if it was Kato or even Jiraiya, but Orochimaru. Masahiko felt anxious for a moment. Fortunately, this was just his wild guess, and Tsunade's words made him relieved. Me and Orochimaru. Grandpa, play Oz. Masahiko was relieved, so he smiled and said, "Where is Jiraiya? Why isn't he with you too? That idiot seems to be writing a book recently." Writing a book? Masahiko was taken aback for a moment. Oh, Jiraiya is going to write a book, and the protagonist's name is Naruto. What was its title? Anyway, this book is essential, and it should yield a lot of witness points. Masahiko thought for a moment, then turned to Orochimaru. How can I help you? Elder, can you find the location of Ryokai Cave for me? Orochimaru said hoarsely. Ryokai Cave. After hearing these words, Masahiko immediately understood Orochimaru's intentions. It seems that the latter wants to learn the Sage Mode, but he couldn't find the location of the Ryokai Cave. After pondering for a while, Masahiko felt like he should refuse. Helping Tsunade to get stronger is fine. But Orochimaru, he was somewhat not sure about him. Initially, his various escaping techniques were strong, and if he let him study something like Sage Mode, Masahiko feared that he won't be able to control him. However, after pondering again, Masahiko nodded. He couldn't just judge him based on the original. I probably know the location, I will take you there. Although Slug once told him that 3 sacred lands are connected together, Masahiko didn't want to take him there through Shikotsu Forest. Senior, just give me the location, and I will go by myself. Masahiko shook his head. I have been in 2 of the sacred lands, and I would like to go to Ryokai Cave too. I'm curious about it. Tomorrow morning, come to find me, we will go there together. Then, I'm sorry for troubling you, Elder Orochimaru said thank you, turned and left. Probably he went to prepare. Masahiko looked at Tsunade. Speaking of which, did you finish your training? You've never shown me your Sage Mode. Tsunade waved her hand repeatedly. I haven't fully mastered it yet, I'll show you later. And then she fled quickly. Masahiko was startled, then remembered the weird paint Hashirama had on his face, and smiled. It seems that she didn't like how her Sage Mode looked. Chapter 185, The Unlucky Clan. In the early morning of the next day, Orochimaru came to find Masahiko, carrying a thick backpack behind him. He seemed like he was ready to go. Masahiko was startled. You brought so many things. Halfway through, he realized that Orochimaru had to practice Sage Mode in Ryokai Cave, and it was customary to bring some food and some other things that he might find useful there. Elder, if you ever ended up fighting the great sage snake, please don't forget to get me some of his blood, Orochimaru said hoarsely. Apparently since Masahiko decided to go with him, he has made some other preparations. I'm okay with the great sage snake. Masahiko had a black line on his face, he really wasn't that confident saying this. Okay, let's go. Masahiko waved his hand, and Orochimaru followed. The three little team members have been assigned a full month of Masahiko's training missions, even though he felt that this won't take that long. Masahiko didn't fly with Orochimaru, since their relationship hasn't yet reached the point where Orochimaru would completely be relaxed while being floated by him. And the two ran all the way, heading to the west of Konoha. The Shikotsu forest is southwest of Konoha, and Ryokai cave is in the north of the forest. Masahiko did his calculation in short, Ryokai cave should be west of Konoha. Of course, it's impossible to determine the exact location. It took them 2 days to reach the western border of the Land of Fire. It was a deserted place at the edges of both the lands of fire and wind. Elder, is this the place? Orochimaru asked. Masahiko frowned, looked around, then smiled. It should be within 50 miles. 50 miles? Orochimaru doubted. Masahiko was actually a little embarrassed, he quickly turned his back and whispered, "Mind's eyes of the Kaguya." Oh? There are villages in this place? Masahiko was surprised. He found a few weak chakra reactions about 5 miles away, like the kind that civilians have. Come with me. Masahiko waved his hand again, and Orochimaru followed. The two turned around and found a small village among several peaks. Elder, this is Orochimaru looked surprised for the second time today. Masahiko was also surprised. The people inside this village dressed up as they did during the Warring States period as if they hadn't been in contact with the outside world for a long time. What is this? Back to the Future I? Masahiko muttered, and the two of them stepped forward and came to the vicinity of the village. The villagers noticed them and gathered around. Who are you guys? Their words were full of vigilance. Masahiko frowned first, and then he felt that the few people with the weak chakra reactions were approaching quickly. These people. Looking at the Masahiko suddenly widened his eyes. I know they were familiar. It turned out to be them. It was the Libra clan from the Warring States period. At that time, because they were deeply corrupted by the Shikotsu forest nature chakra, they asked Masahiko to seal their ability to transform. Later, they moved to this place. It was a blood seal, and it should be stronger from generation to generation. But why are there still people with chakra appearing? Looking at their expressions, these people seem to be still losing control. Masahiko looked around with a dumbfounded expression. It won't be. Unexpectedly, Orochimaru didn't choose to attack them. Masahiko kept his dumbfounded expression, as the villagers kept looking at him weirdly. Masahiko thought that they must have recognized him as the hero who saved their clan, so he stood there with his head high, waiting for their gratitude. Unexpectedly, they didn't come to him but surrounded Masahiko with visible signs of hostility. Uzumaki Masahiko, I didn't expect you to be alive, you haven't forgotten what you did to our clan. The leader growled. Masahiko was stunned and looked at Orochimaru, who shrugged as he was saying, I don't know. I didn't forget, but did you forget? Masahiko, who was waiting for gratitude, felt helpless by this questioning. Since you forgot, let us remind you. Yes, please, this grandpa is older now and has a bad memory. Back then, the 7th Patriarch entrusted you to seal our ability to transform, but you only denied us the right to use ninjutsu, and the ability to transformation has always existed. Masahiko sighed, I said that I've told him that you will not be able to use chakra after that. But you also said that it will seal our ability to transform. The people on the other side looked angry. Then you can't blame me, I can only say that this is really unlucky. Unlucky? Masahiko didn't know whether to cry or laugh. The Libra clan was simply blessed by fate. They moved out before because of the Shikotsu forest and its nature chakra that was corrupting their bodies, but they eventually ended up living in the Ryokai cave vicinity. Many people tried to find the locations of 3 sacred lands before and failed. Yet they accidentally ditched out 2 of them, which can only be called unlucky. After explaining, the other side looked as if they were struck by lightning, and couldn't speak for a long time. If you're leaving again, please don't go south, Mount Miyaboku is over there. Elder, we can let them move to Konoha, Orochimaru said. Masahiko frowned at Orochimaru, who seemed kind of interested. But Orochimaru's suggestion gave him an idea. You can move to the land of whirlpools. The country is still short of population, and even though his sealing technique is LV9, he felt that there must be another way to solve this problem, and this way, the Uzumaki will also have a relatively strong subsidiary shinobi. The people on the opposite side were obviously a little tempted, and couldn't decide. Masahiko waited for a moment, then smiled and said, "Don't make a decision in such a hurry. We will stay here for a while. Please discuss it first." With that being said, Masahiko walked toward the village's back with Orochimaru and finally sensed the Ryokai cave location. Just a small mountain behind, Masahiko found a bottomless hole. His perception was fully open, and his expression was uneasy. "This is the Ryokai cave, you can go by yourself." Numerous large and small snakes appeared in his perception, and it felt a little scary. Orochimaru wasn't afraid, he nodded, then directly entered. Masahiko's was still uneasy, yet his curiosity got the better of him, and quickly chased after him. Chapter 186, The Snake's Slough. The expression on Masahiko's face was ugly. Although he had withstood everything that this world threw at him, ups and downs for 100 years, a tight cave full of snakes was the limit. The Ryokai cave's landform was very hard to describe, caves within caves, and entrances and exits everywhere, it was simply a maze. More importantly, all of these caves were full of large and small green snakes. Masahiko had the repulsion force turned on all the time, so that these snakes are at least 10 meters away from him. Orochimaru was worth of their kind, he didn't look bothered, in fact, he was looking around with interest. "We're going this way," Masahiko perceived slightly and said to Orochimaru. When he came to the cave, Masahiko hadn't dared to maximize his perception, not because he was worried that the sage snake would find them, but because of how many snakes showed up in his perception before it was creepy. As for how to tell they were taking the right direction, Masahiko was simply heading towards the place where the natural energy was more concentrated. As he walked deeper and deeper, Masahiko's anxiety calmed slightly. Although the size of snakes is constantly increasing, the relative number was decreasing a bit too. For Masahiko's intensive phobia of snakes, this was much more comfortable. Although Ryokai Cave looks small, because it was basically a maze, it wasn't a short walk. Masahiko and Orochimaru were moving fast, but it still took an hour before Masahiko could sense relatively large chakra fluctuations. After walking for a few minutes again, a dozen giant snakes appeared in front of him. Well, it wasn't particularly significant, far less than Manda, which is only 10 meters long, but Masahiko could feel that they have a lot of chakra in their bodies, and they should belong to sage kind. The snakes also saw the two of them, and immediately surrounded them. Humans? Obviously not friendly. Masahiko frowned, feeling surrounded by more than a dozen snakes wasn't very relaxing, and just when he was about to do it, Orochimaru stopped him. "Aida, it's me." With a hoarse voice, Orochimaru came to the rescue. Note, Aida is a summoning snake, who resides in the Rika cave, that has pledged loyalty to Sasuke Uchiha. Orochimaru-sama. The dark blue giant snake nodded as if he had just recognized him. "Take me to Manda." Orochimaru didn't directly state his purpose but asked to see Manda first. Note, Manda is the boss summon of the Rika cave snakes. There are small snakes that are easy to handle. But there are also these scary giant snakes who surrounded them. Thanks to Aida they let them pass. Ryokai cave, are snakes really more hierarchical? Masahiko sighed. This feeling of encountering strong snakes as you advance is a bit like playing a game. But, I didn't know that there are 3 giant snakes of Manda's level. As he moved forward, there were 3 larger chakra reactions in Masahiko's perception, all of which were probably on the same level as Manda. After taking 5 or 6 corners, 3 giant snakes of different colors appeared in front of the 2, the purple was Manda, and the other 2 cyan and red. The 3 surrounded them, and Masahiko's first thought was, Shinra Tensei. Of course, he wasn't gonna fight the landlords, and they seemed like they were waiting for them there. "Orochimaru, you managed to find this place," Manda said. It seems that Orochimaru told him that he was gonna come to Ryokai Cave for practice. But Manda stared coldly at Masahiko. "Why did you bring another human with you?" Masahiko looked at the snake's mouth that was approaching quickly, and out of nervousness, he turned on the repulsive force fully on. Whether it was the 3 giant snakes, Orochimaru, they all flew upside down instantly, crashing into many caves. Looking at the smoke and dust around him, Masahiko's face turned black. He wasn't gonna let Manda bully him, he wasn't a glass heart. Moreover, he's usually the one bullying people. I'm not here to cause trouble, Masahiko sighed. Just now, he has output all of his chakra into the Shinra tense, and he even subconsciously turned the sage mode on. Watching the initially narrow cave suddenly bigger, Masahiko felt that he might have overreacted. Fortunately, the three snakes weren't seriously injured. As for Orochimaru, he didn't worry much, his escaping techniques were superb. Elder, we came here so I can learn sage mode. Sure enough, Orochimaru's voice came over after a while, but it was a bit trembled. He wasn't sure if it because he was injured or angry. Masahiko looked in his direction and waved his hand, and I'm okay with it, but don't forget to tell Manda to brush his teeth in the future before talking to me. As he was talking about Manda, the latter swam back and surrounded Masahiko with the dozen or so large snake they encountered before, watching him warily. Unexpected resistance. Masahiko murmured. The other two obviously won't come back for a while. Manda, calm down. Orochimaru tried to comfort him, but obviously, it was in vain. Damn you, humans! He roared and threw his tail towards Masahiko, but the latter condensed a lightning sword and nailed it to the ground. Manda roared and struggled in pain. Masahiko didn't take advantage of this situation, after all, it was Orochimaru's summoning beast. He then turned around and looked at the dozen little snakes, which were still wary of him. You figure out a way to pull out this sword, we're going to find your master. Orochimaru, follow me. As if nothing had happened, Masahiko to Orochimaru and continued on. Masahiko had already sensed the white snake sage's chakra. It stands to reason that, with such a big movement, it should have come a long time ago, but it didn't move, which made Masahiko a little curious. Followed by Orochimaru all the way, after a few kilometers, Masahiko finally saw the last of the three sages, hokage Sennin. On a huge stone chair, a giant snake with snow-white scales sat cross-legged. Hokage Sennin's eyes were unexpectedly not scary. Orochimaru, we finally meet, you're here to learn sage mode? His tone was also very gentle, which made Orochimaru a little surprised and looked at Masahiko. Masahiko smiled, I guess he's willing to teach you. Orochimaru frowned before nodding slowly, feeling that something wasn't right. Masahiko was actually a little confused too. He had injured a few snakes just now, but hokage Sennin seems to have no intention of pursuing it. Well, resolving this peacefully is better. Though I felt much stronger chakra from him when we were coming here, this one feels weak. As soon as Masahiko thought of this, he was startled and subconsciously rose into the air. Suddenly, a giant snake mouth emerged from the ground and bit towards Masahiko. Looking at the colossal chair again, the giant white snake lost its solidarity and got flat. It was just a snake's slough? Masahiko sighed. Earth Release, Super Fist Rock Technique. Chapter 187, a little disappointing. You're a dignified immortal sage existence, yet you fight dirty, you're really shameless. After he avoided hokage Sennin's attack, Masahiko yelled and struck him down with his Super First Rock Technique. But hokage Sennin shrugged it off as if it was nothing. He had no idea what kind of technique the hokage Sennin used, but just now, he managed to conceal his presence and hide underground. If Masahiko didn't feel that something was wrong, he would have won a free ticket on a tribe to the snake's stomach. The white snake sage stood upright and stared at Masahiko closely with its pair of snake pupils. Uzumaki Masahiko, why did you attack the red and green snake? Aren't you going to give me an explanation? Masahiko was startled, he didn't expect hokage Sennin to know his name and felt secretly happy. It turns out that my reputation has spread well. The green and the red snake? Masahiko murmured, hold on a minute, the blue snake is called Aida, and the red snake is called Akata, right? So the question is, why is the purple snake is called Manda, 10,000 snakes, not Murata? Note, Aida, literally means blue snake. Akata, red snake. Manda, 10,000 snakes. Murata, purple snake. Hokage Sennin was taken aback for a moment, then he got furious, but Masahiko waved his hand quickly, saying, you can call it whatever you like, as long as you're happy. He didn't want to fight hokage Sennin. Although he didn't think he would lose, he still didn't believe it would be easy to win. The super fist rock technique he used just now didn't break the opponent's defense, and the escaping abilities of the snakes were too strong. Moreover, the main purpose of coming here is to see Hokage Sennin with his own eyes and also so that Orochimaru can practice the sage mode. Orochimaru. As soon as he thought of Orochimaru, he looked around to find him examining the snake's slough with interest. Orochimaru, are you using me? Masahiko was dumbfounded. He looked back to find that Hokage Sennin has already fetched a cigarette and put it in his mouth. As he thought, Hokage Sennin isn't very reliable. Someone was studying his skin, and he was in the mood for a cigarette. After hesitating, Masahiko called him out. Orochimaru, stop licking that snake skin, and come here to light up Hokage Sennin's cigarette. As soon as Masahiko talked, the white snake sage revealed his killing intent again. However, Masahiko wasn't too worried anymore. He felt that the Hokage Sennin had never intended to do anything to him from the start. It was just a test. Sure enough, he kept staring at him for a while, then slowly swam around, heading toward his throne. Orochimaru let go of the snake's slough and came to Masahiko's side. How was the research? The time is too short, but the hardness was very high, even a sharp sword won't cut it. Orochimaru actually answered Masahiko's question thoughtfully. Masahiko's face turned dark, but Orochimaru continued anyway, did you get its blood? Masahiko. It seems that Orochimaru has never been interested in learning sage mode. All that he wanted was Hokage Sennin's blood. Uzumaki Masahiko, what the slug said is right, you really are a nonchalant person. Hokage Sennin sat back on its chair and spoke slowly. Masahiko was stunned. He didn't expect the slug sage to tell the snake sage about him. It seems that the relationship between these immortals is unexpectedly good. However, couldn't the slug sage say a nicer thing about him? Fire release, fireball. Masahiko didn't say a word, and directly lit Hokage Sennin's cigarette, but he didn't control it and burned the entire thing out. Hokage Sennin spewed out a puff of black smoke and said, sure enough, the slug sage was right to describe you that way. Masahiko scratched his head and said helplessly, you are a divine creature. You shouldn't smoke such a cheap cigarette. Orochimaru, give the master a good cigarette. No problem, elder. After that, the atmosphere became a bit awkward, with both being quiet. Masahiko didn't know what Hokage Sennin was thinking, and Orochimaru himself was at a loss. Masahiko thought he should be sinister, cunning, and cruel. But after seeing him, he found that it wasn't the case at all. Masahiko injured many high-ranked snakes, but Hokage Sennin didn't retaliate and let him go with a silent warning. Masahiko has always been straightforward and directly asked. Why aren't you trying to do anything to me anymore? I won't gain anything from killing you. Hokage Sennin's words made Masahiko wake up. He was a wise immortal and the highest-ranked creature in this sacred land. Avenging 3 small snakes are not worth the efforts of the great snake sage. Masahiko's got his answer, so he took 2 steps back with a smile. This trip wasn't about him, the ultimate goal is to help Orochimaru learn the sage mode. Orochimaru and Hokage Sennin talked for a while after that. Masahiko ignored it and wandered around the place. When he first came in, he noticed that there were many exquisite carvings around. After he came closer, he saw an unexpected thing. Is this a relic from the Warring States period? He had never found such a thing in Mount Myaboku and Shikotsu Forest. It's more like a man-made sculpture. Maybe many years ago, Ryokai Cave was inhabited by humans. Masahiko thought and looked at Hokage Sennin behind him, but this time he didn't ask. After all, if it was really inhabited by humans, and Hokage Sennin took their land, asking him about it would be really awkward. Hokage Sennin was unexpectedly so easy to speak to, and he had already begun to instruct Orochimaru on how to practice the sage mode, but Masahiko didn't plan to stay here and wait. Orochimaru, the sage mode isn't so easy to learn. So you continue to work hard. The only thing I could help you with was bringing you here. Masahiko said these words then turned. Thank you, elder. Hokage Sennin didn't stop Masahiko, and not a single snake disturbed him on the way back until he walked out of Ryokai Cave. The trip to Ryokai Cave, how do I say it? Yes, a bit disappointing. Masahiko muttered to himself after seeing the sunshine again. Hokage Sennin was completely different from what he imagined in his mind. It's been a long time since he got involved with new people. In fact, he was actually looking forward to fighting the great snake sage. Speaking of which, the toad sage predicts, the slug sage heals, what the snake sage actually do? Masahiko pondered. Initially, he thought that the snakes are better fighters, but when he fought against hokage Sennin, Masahiko felt that he was just a little stronger than the slug sage, and he should be able to defeat him. Good at escaping techniques and surviving? Or is it good at sneak attacks? Maybe he's just good at taking advantage and avoiding dangerous situations? Well, he really knew when to stop. Maybe he knew that he can't defeat me. Masahiko thought narcissistically. Chapter 188, Elder. Although the trip to Ryokai Cave eventually turned out to be a disappointment, Masahiko had some other gains outside, and the Libra clan agreed to migrate to the land of the whirlpools. I'm very sorry, Uzumaki Masahiko Dano, you've helped us again, and we were blaming you all of this time, the Libra's 10th patriarch said. Masahiko waved his hand, it's okay. I won't pursue it, you're already unlucky enough. Libra patriarch. The guy suddenly looked so worried about the future of his plan. Fortunately, Masahiko was only mocking him, he knew that taking them to the land of whirlpools is the best thing for them. The Libra clan wasn't big, nor small, they had 120 people. Masahiko could easily fly them all up once he turns on his sage mode, but flying that number in the sky would attract a lot of attention. However, when they started walking back, Masahiko felt that it was too slow. After all, only 5 of them were at the Chunin level. And if they kept this pace, it will take them a month to cross the land of fire. Should I let the shadow clone take them back? Masahiko murmured. In fact, this is the best solution, but the shadow clone. Let's fly back. Masahiko gritted his teeth, then floated more than 100 people in the air for the first time. Because most of them were ordinary people, Masahiko didn't fly too high, nor too fast. However, that meant that most people on the ground will see them clearly. So on this day, many civilians thought they have crossed over to Dragon Ball Z world. In the land of the whirlpools, Masahiko briefly explained the origins of these people, so she can help them settle down well, then returned to Konoha. The trip took a total of 3 days, which is much faster than he thought. And since he arranged a 1-month training course for the 3 children before, he had nothing to do. What Masahiko was more concerned about is Jiraiya's book. In these 3 days, Masahiko finally remembered the title's book. It should be called The Tale of the Utterly Gutsy Shinobi. The story follows the adventures of a ninja named Naruto, a name Jiraiya came up with while eating ramen. In his book, Naruto never gives up and vows to break the curse, representing the cycles of war, conflict, and hatred that occupy the ninja world. As this is an idea, Jiraiya first heard spoken by Nagato, and the novel is dedicated to him. But now Nagato is Masahiko's disciple, and God knows what Jiraiya will write about. And speaking of writing, as a senpai writer, I should give him guidance. Masahiko remembered that he was also a writer who has released 2 out of 3 books, even though the spread wasn't wide. Masahiko came to Jiraiya's for the first time. As an orphan, even though he was an S-ranked ninja, Jiraiya's home was simple, but unexpectedly neat. Masahiko didn't know at all, and walked directly into Jiraiya's house. It's quite addictive to walk in like this, you can only do this in anime. Masahiko smiled, sensing Jiraiya's chakra in the back room. When he was about to push the door, Masahiko hesitated for a moment, remembering Jiraiya's twisted personality. I hope he's not right. Frozen for a moment, the door in front of him suddenly was opened, and Jiraiya walked out, then stood in front of him with a pair of thick dark circles. Jiraiya looked so tired to the point that he didn't even react when he saw Masahiko. Masahiko looked at him up and down, then said, "Son, you really need to take care of your body." "Okay." Jiraiya nodded, then bypassed Masahiko and went to the toilet. "This guy," Masahiko murmured, "something is off about him." Masahiko walked into the room. "Sure enough, writing isn't easy except for a genius like me." Turning his gaze to the desk, Masahiko noticed how many papers were thrown away on the ground. Masahiko took a page from the desk. A great shinobi isn't determined by how much ninjutsu he mastered, but in the perseverance to never give up. A straightforward person who will never break his vows, and follows his ninja paths to the end. Upon reading this, a smile was drawn on Masahiko's face. This is really heartwarming. Just when he was about to pick up the second page, Jiraiya rushed in. "Elder, why are you at my house?" Masahiko didn't answer, but smiled and said, "Why aren't you calling me old devil like you used to do?" Jiraiya whispered, "I was young and ignorant before." Masahiko just looked relieved, and Jiraiya continued, "Maybe I should call you grandpa in the future like everyone does." Masahiko was speechless. "You've really grown up to be a great shinobi." Masahiko whispered, then he said, "I'm here as your senpai in writing, and I will give you my guidance." Jiraiya was shocked, "Grandpa, you were a writer?" His face was full of disbelief. Masahiko waved his hand, then looked at the bookshelf, "You might find one of my books there." "Impossible." Jiraiya widened his eyes. Masahiko immediately got up and went to search. The bookshelf was divided into 2 layers. Masahiko glanced at the first one slightly, then glanced back to Jiraiya with contempt. They were all pornographic books and they all looked boring. Well, boredom is the key here. The lower one was normal, from books about ninjutsu, to the introduction of world geography, to the origins and disputes of the 5 major villages, so, none of his books. Theirs isn't. I really thought that. Masahiko's words suddenly were cut short when he saw a familiar book on the upper layer. The Dream of Building a Village, isn't this written by me? Masahiko had a bad feeling, so he didn't claim it, and turned to look at Jiraiya. The name of that book is quite normal, why is it in the pornographic layer? Jiraiya was also taken aback, he quickly took the book, glanced at it, then suddenly looked like he realized something. "Elder, don't you know this book?" It was made by an unknown writer from Konoha, but he was really a twisted man. Jiraiya continued, "The book is about the friendship between the 2 legendary ninjas, Uchiha Madara and the first Hokage." Jiraiya also changed his tone when he said friendship, showing a distressed expression. If this guy wrote something about a man and a woman, with this kind of skill, I'm sure it would have become famous, but unfortunately. Jiraiya shook his head, took a deep breath, then continued, "But it's too later. When this book was published, Uchiha Madara was still in the village. I'm sure the poor guy still gets chills, even after death, when he remembers it. There aren't too many copies, so I added it to my collection. I wanted to ask if you have ever heard about this writer's second book. But I didn't expect that you didn't even know him." Masahiko gritted his teeth, "The second book? I even have the third book that he never published." "There's a third book?" Jiraiya was surprised. "Do you want to see it?" "Yes." Sage Mode, Kai. 7th Gate, Kai. Boom. Jiraiya's house exploded instantly. "Cough, old devil, what the hell are you doing?" Chapter 189, Contest. Instantly, Jiraiya's house exploded, and there was nothing left there to recover. After a moment, Masahiko sensed many familiar chakras quickly approaching. Looking at Jiraiya, who was sitting in ruins with a crying face, Masahiko looked relieved again and closed the Sage Mode and the 7th Gate. "Elder Masahiko, what's going on here?" Sakumo was the first to arrive with the Umbu mask on his face. Masahiko waved twice, then looked around. The people living near the place were all ninjas, so there weren't any unwanted accidents or injuries. "It's okay. I was just having a discussion with Jiraiya here, and I accidentally used too much force." Sakumo obviously didn't believe this. How would Jiraiya be stupid to the point that he considered discussing with Masahiko? Since it's nothing, Sakumo couldn't do anything about it even if he wanted, so he just left. Masahiko hurriedly stopped him, pointing to the surroundings, "More and more people are coming, so you better start the evacuation." Sakumo had his mask on, so Masahiko didn't see his expression, but it seemed obvious that he wasn't very happy about this unnecessary task he just troubled him with. Masahiko looked at the heartbroken Jiraiya and felt a little embarrassed. This was really too much. "Come on, it's just a house, I'll give you the money to buy a better one, how about this?" Jiraiya raised his head in frustration, "Old devil, you have ruined my collection, and only this one is left. Do you want me to follow the steps of that man?" he said while showing him the same book. Masahiko's face turned dark, he embarrassed himself for nothing. Even my half-finished first book was destroyed. The very first work of Jiraiya-sama. Jiraiya looked really sad. Masahiko sighed, he really messed up this time. "It's okay, I think it would be better if you write for a second time. I really didn't want to do this, but the book in your hands, I wrote it." Jiraiya jumped up, "I knew it. No wonder you tried to destroy it. Old devil, I really didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Masahiko's face stiffened. Madara and Hashirama's ghosts have really come back to haunt him down for what he did for them back in the days. Yes, it's all because of Jiraiya, he shouldn't have collected it in the first place. Looking at the ruins around him, Masahiko turned and left. Very well, I would love to see you sleep on Konoha's streets tonight. No, Elder, didn't you said that you're gonna pay me for a new house? The title changed all of sudden. Masahiko ignored him, but Jiraiya didn't give up and yelled, threatening him, be careful, I will spread the word about the identity of this book's writer. Then I tell others that you're always following Tsunade just to cover up for your true intentions. In fact, deep inside, you're in love with Orochimaru's sneaky eyes. And let's see who they will believe. Masahiko struck back. Jiraiya watched Masahiko walking away, then he looked back at the ruins around him, and really felt like crying this time. I really can't help it. Masahiko kept walking away, and he suddenly remembered why he came here in the first place. Forget it, it will take him a while to finish writing, also writing the story again is better. I remember that his first book didn't have success at all. Also, he will have to find a place to live besides, I really don't want to see him now. Masahiko never expected that his identity as a senior writer would become his dark history. After a few turns, Masahiko came to Konoha training ground to check if his team was being lazy. But before he reached them, the voices of two kids attracted his attention. It was 5 years old, Kakashi fighting 6 years old, Mato Guy. It has only been a short time since they started school. Did Guy and Kakashi already become friends? Perhaps because of Jiraiya, Masahiko's mind now has also become twisted. Speaking of it, the two have never married in the original. Please don't tell me. Masahiko shook his head quickly, let go of these messy thoughts, and focused on the battle before him. Neither of them used weapons, nor did they use any ninjutsu. It was a pure taijutsu duel. Masahiko didn't try to interrupt and watched from afar. It seems that Guy is still a bit inferior to Kakashi in terms of physical strength, even though the latter is younger than him. But at this age, the gap isn't that big. However, Kakashi seems like he has also practiced Kenjutsu. Masahiko looked at the short sword that Kakashi was carrying on his back. For a guy like Masahiko, even a battle between two adult shinobi would be boring to watch, but these two kids' little confrontation was really interesting. Come on, slap him in the face, Guy. He even picked a side. A moment later Kakashi kicked Guy in the face and sent him flying. Guy lay down on the ground and didn't seem like he was planning to get up anytime soon. So Kakashi finally lay down too and started catching his breaths. Kakashi, you won again this time. After a long time, Guy said. Ah. Kakashi said, 2-0. Masahiko smiled watching this, it's only the second game, Kakashi is quite the competitive guy. However, Guy's ambition had no limit, and immediately said, Kakashi, let's do one more battle. Youth. However, his body had a limit, and his legs were clearly trembling. Not to be outdone, Kakashi also stood up. Masahiko frowned. With their current physical strength, they won't be able to fight for another round, and this might get dangerous. And just when he was about to step forward, the two started dancing weirdly. Rock, scissors, paper. Masahiko's mouth twitched, he almost forgot about this part. Rock, scissors, paper. I won, Kakashi. Guy cried happily. Masahiko's heart moved, he could no longer just watch and walked over. Elder Masahiko. Great master. The two addressed him the same way their fathers usually do. Looking at the two of you competing, I thought I should teach you guys a new game. But it's a difficult one. As soon as they heard it was difficult, the two of them nodded confidently. Come on, I will teach you. It has the same rules as rock, paper, scissors, but you will use both hands, and after you both reveal the kind of hands you've chosen, you can withdraw one and keep the one you think it has the better probability to win or draw. And you say while playing, one punch from the left and one from the right, let's take a punch together. Watching the two kids tentatively practice, Masahiko turned over and left satisfied. Suddenly, Chinese characters flashed before his eyes. Witness and completely change a branch story of Naruto World, Guy and Kakashi's contest. Reward 10 witness points. Completely changed? Masahiko was shocked, not knowing what he changed. It wasn't until a long time later that he knew that Guy had never won once after he taught them this new game. After all, rock, paper, scissors originally depend on luck, but the new game depends on playing smart. And Guy lacked a bit of IQ. Chapter 190, I might have helped a fake grandpa. Successfully gaining new points from Kakashi and Guy's contest, Masahiko kept walking forward toward the training ground's depths. There, he found his two disciples training. Masahiko looked around and shook his head, helplessly. Sure enough, Kushina isn't here. What are girls thinking these days? What a waste of youth. Bah! What I'm saying? I have to stay away from that father and son, this is really contagious. Watching his two disciples working hard was very pleasing to Masahiko, and he really didn't feel like pursuing Kushina's affairs. He just gained 100 points by luck and was simply happy. Oh my days, I'm really happy now. After he walked to a corner, Masahiko used the transformation technique, then walked to the Amazon store, while humming. It might seem crazy what I'm about to say. Masahiko is here, you can take a break. I'm a hot old sage that can go to space. Flying in the air, like I don't care baby. By the way, note, Pharrell Williams happy edited. Because I'm hap. Wait. Suddenly, it hit him back, what kind of product should I add to the store since I'm free now? On Konoha Street, Masahiko kept dancing on the rhythm left and right, while thinking. Be careful, Grandpa. A cry came, then suddenly Masahiko found himself being supported from the back by someone. Masahiko smiled and glanced at the side. Initially, he was longing for a chance to meet Obito personally, but he didn't expect that the latter will take the initiative by helping him crossing the road. Masahiko's body suddenly hollowed out, and his upper half leaned on the boy who was supporting him. Thank you, kid, if it weren't you, I'm afraid that I... To be honest, this acting should be awarded an Oscar. Obviously, Obito didn't see through it, and kept supporting Masahiko. Grandpa, where is your home? I'll take you back. Masahiko snickered secretly and pointed out the direction, then the two carried on to the Amazon store. Passing by Ichiraku Ramen, Toki rushed out quickly. Hago Romo-san, what happened? Masahiko winked at him twice, but it was in vain. Toki didn't understand the sign, boss. It's okay, I went out for a run just now, and suddenly felt like I was gonna faint out. Masahiko stood up straight again, making Obito look dumbfounded. Grandpa, are you okay now? Yes, I feel alright now, thanks to you. Scratching his head while feeling a bit lost, Obito couldn't help but doubt. But Obito looked at Masahiko's grey hair, hesitated, and couldn't bring himself to pursue it. Then I'll leave first, Grandpa. I need to practice, please be careful, in the future. Wait. Masahiko stopped him, since you're already here, why don't you come to my shop for a glass of water? Then he immediately pulled Obito, who followed him a bit unwillingly. Obito didn't want to come in, but he couldn't just refuse an elderly's request. However, when he came to the Amazon shop, the sculptures around immediately caught his eyes. These are, Hokage-sama, the legendary Sunin, and our patriarch. Obito looked at them over and over, exclaiming again and again. After a long while, he finally calmed down, but shouting that many times made him feel thirsty. Grandpa, where do you keep the water? Obito hasn't forgotten that Masahiko brought him here to pour for him a glass of water. Masahiko was startled. He on the other hand totally forgot, and he actually didn't have such a thing in his shop, not even a single cup. Just wait, I'll go next door, to Ichiraku Ramen, and ask him for a glass of water for you. Don't bother, Grandpa. Obito hurriedly stopped him, I'll just go home. Why are you in such a hurry to go? No, it's just that it's getting late, I have to go back. With the feeling that something was really off about this man, Obito spoke incoherently, as he walked backward toward the exit. Masahiko's eyes moved, then he shouted, be careful. Obito got startled for a moment, then he heard a pop behind him, and turned his head stiffly. Masahiko rushed over, then squatted down with an expression full of pain. Poor third Hokage, what an end the fate has brought to you. Obito looked terrified. Grandpa, was it me? Masahiko looked up fiercely, who else? Obviously, it wasn't me, I was far away. Obito looked like he got hit by a lightning bolt, but in fact, Masahiko was the one who made it fall by manipulating gravity. Grandpa, I'm sorry, I will pay you for it. Heartbroken, Obito took out his small wallet. Masahiko smirked and stretched out one finger. 100 ryo? Obito breathed out a sigh of relief, he will just need to skip one dinner. Masahiko shook his head. How much is that then? Add 3 zeros. 1 million. Fortunately, Obito couldn't count how many lunches he had to skip to pay Masahiko back, otherwise, he would have fainted out. However, he was really a good boy. Although he knew he couldn't afford to pay, he still didn't bail out. Grandpa, I don't have that much money. Masahiko smiled secretly, his ultimate goal was finally achieved, so he also sighed, pretending to be disappointed. This version of the third hokage, only have one copy. He said while manipulating the gravity to hide away the rest. Obito felt guiltier. And as soon as he saw that, Masahiko played his last card, well, I'm always alone in this store. Seeing that you're a good boy, how about you become my apprentice and inherit my carving style, this way you can pay me back. Obito was startled first, then he shook his head again and again, Grandpa, I will pay you back as soon as possible. I have school, so I can't study carving. It's okay. Masahiko waved his hand, just come here to learn in the weekends. Obito hesitated again, but I still have to practice my ninjutsu at the weekend. Sculpting is also a practice. Masahiko took a piece of wood out of nowhere and then started sculpturing it with a carving knife that he draws out of thin air. His right hand was moving so fast that it created an afterimage every time he changed the movement. And in a matter of seconds, a small figure of Obito was in his hands. Looking at his figure, Obito looked dumbfounded, this. Masahiko smiled and handed it to him, think about it, if you can have my skills and speed, people will not be able to keep up while fighting against you. Obito's face showed excitement, but he still hesitated. Masahiko rolled his eyes and finished with a killing blow. Also sculpting is the kind of skill that is very pleasing to girls. Think about it, after you learn from me, you will be able to carve a figure for your beloved girl, and give it to her. A flush spread almost instantly on Obito's face, he obviously imagined the scene where he gifts Rin a cute sculpture of her. After a while, he recovered and looked at Masahiko, Grandpa, I didn't expect you to be the convincing guy. Masahiko felt suddenly stabbed. So now you're willing to learn sculpting? Masahiko handed a piece of wood and the carving knife to Obito. First, get used to the feeling of handing the carving knife. It's a bit different than a kunai. I will go find something inside. Obito nodded, took it, then waved it right and left. After a while, Masahiko came out carrying a sculpture of the third hokage with one hand. Obito got startled, then remembered when Masahiko said, one copy. Suddenly the corner of his mouth twitched, he, it seemed that I've helped a fake grandpa. Chapter 191, Hidden Ninja. Although Obito knew that many things were wrong with Masahiko, his carving skills still stunned him, and the prospect of learning it was gonna open a whole new world of possibilities for him to get close to. In short, after so many years, Masahiko's Amazon shop finally got an apprentice. From Monday to Friday, Masahiko will appear with his original form in Konoha to teach the 3 children. On weekends, Masahiko will suddenly disappear, and incarnate as the Amazon shop owner, to teach Obito sculpturing. After accepting such an apprentice, Masahiko was no longer in a hurry to add goods to the shop, it was already entertaining to have Obito there. In a blink of an eye, a month passed, and another weekend came. Masahiko used the transformation technique in a deserted part of Konoha, then went to the Amazon shop unhurriedly. Wait, I don't need to hurry. That kid is always late anyway. Unexpectedly, when Masahiko arrived, Obito was already standing there at the door, with a few small kids beside him. Kakashi, why did you came too? Obito said with an annoyed tone. I was wondering what you idiot was doing all this time. It seems that you've been accepted as a disciple by the master of the Amazon shop, so I thought I should check it out. Obito was surprised, is the master that famous? Of course, Obito. Beside them, Rin said with a smile. It's said that the master is the best carver in Konoha. Although his sculptures are so expensive, almost all the seniors who can afford it bought one. Is he that good? Obito murmured. Of course. You wouldn't have been accepted to be my disciple if I was any less. Masahiko came over with a smile. Master! The 3 shouted. In addition to Kakashi and Rin, Kurane was also there, since she was a good friend of Rin. It took him a moment, then Obito smiled slyly, I didn't know before. Also, Master, you're late today. Obito, who was always late, finally had the chance to say that. Masahiko sighed, I had to help an old grandpa to cross the road today, so I was delayed for a while. Obito's face stiffened, and felt like he was in trouble. Masahiko walked in, then opened the door of the shop. I'll come in. Thank you, Master. Inside the store, Masahiko watched the other kids look around, then glanced at Obito and smiled. Why did you bring the girl you like so soon? You haven't officially started practicing your sculptures yet. After all, it was on the weekends, and only 1 month has passed, and since Obito wasn't a carving genius, he still had a long way ahead of him. That's not true, I don't like. Obito blushed instantly. Kakashi, look here, it's White Fang-sama. Rin said with a surprised tone. Masahiko then turned to him and smiled, well, since they're already here, go and give them a tour inside the store. Obito quickly ran to them, and Masahiko took a piece of wood, glanced at the 4 children, then the carving knife in his hand started moving fast. When the 4 children finished their tour, Masahiko already had 2 small wooden sculptures in front of him, namely Kakashi and Obito. And the one in his hand was for Kurane, which hasn't been carved yet. Kakashi, who was always calm, looked at his sculptures with widened eyes. They both were carved pouting their lips, one to the left and one to the right, but they looked really funny when they were placed together. So cute. Kakashi with Obito. Isn't it, Kurane? Yes. Kakashi and Obito quickly recovered and acted like they didn't care. Masahiko smiled and looked up. Yui Kurane, this little girl has an unusual charm by nature. While they were looking at Kakashi and Obito's sculptures, Masahiko quickly finished Kurane's, since she didn't have any unusual traits besides her red eyes. Looking at how she smiled, looking at it, Masahiko smiled and directly handed it to her. Then finally Masahiko took a deep look at Rin, then looked at Kakashi and Obito's sculptures and gestured back and forth. Under the puzzled gazes of the 4 children, Masahiko started his work about 10 minutes after. This time, he didn't carve it standing, he had to sit down because he knew it gonna take him a lot of effort. Moreover, the paints on her face weren't so easy to show. Therefore, Masahiko spent half an hour to complete it. The kids maintained their puzzled expression as Masahiko placed Rin's figure in the middle with Kakashi and Obito on its sides. Unfortunately, Minato isn't here. Otherwise, it would have looked the same as that picture. Masahiko thought. Come here, look at it. This is proof of your friendship. Each person will take one. And I hope that this scene will engrave in your mind forever. Humph, who wants to be friends with Kakashi? Obito murmured. Master, what about Kurane? Rin whispered beside Masahiko. Masahiko froze for a moment, he only focused on the 3 of them because they were a team, and totally forgot about Kurane. Give me yours. Masahiko quickly turned to Kurane, then placed her sculpture behind, replacing Minato, and the original harmonious picture was instantly shattered. Okay, one for each person, take it. Masahiko quickly turned off the topic and handed them over. Usually, I sell each one for 1 million ryo. You're lucky today. The 4 children thanked him again and again. Master, Kakashi hesitated slightly, but still said, are you a ninja? Masahiko was taken aback, how did you notice? The carving knife you used seems to be able to transmit chakra. Masahiko widened his eyes, then he remembered that his father uses his short sword the same, no wonder he recognized the technique. Huh? Master, you're a ninja? Obito asked in surprise, and then remembered helping him across the road and felt confused. Masahiko nodded and shook his head, does it matter? Anyway, I'm just an old man selling sculptures now. As soon as these words came out, a kind of a superior aura controlled the place. At that very moment, Masahiko clicked 12 likes for himself. Sure enough, the 4 children on the opposite side looked impressed. Obito was particularly excited, Master, what's your rank? Can you teach me ninjutsu? Masahiko maintained that demeanor, didn't I say that carving is also a kind of practice? Obito nodded as if he understood. Obito, study hard. Rin's encouragement came, and Obito immediately got on fire. No problem. Master, let's start my training now. The other three glanced at each other, then we will leave first, Master. Masahiko walked them to the door, then sniggered. This acting of being a mysterious master has really worked out. Chapter 192, Brainwashing. In the Amazon store, Masahiko looked helplessly at Obito's so-called hard work, while a thick layer of sawdust was already piled on the ground. Rin's encouragement meant the world to him, and nothing was going to stop him, or that what he thought. Stop, stop. Masahiko hurriedly stopped him, I'm teaching you how to carve, not how to chop wood. Crack. The moment Masahiko stopped him, the wood in Obito's hand cracked into two pieces. Obito was clearly fantasizing about Rin again. And Masahiko felt already tired of dealing with this teenager. Ah. Sorry, Master. Masahiko shook his head and took the carving knife. Okay, you got really used to the carving knife during this month. Let's officially start learning to sculpt. Masahiko cleaned up the broken wood, then looked for a stone around. I'm no longer wasting my wood on you. Use stones to practice. Masahiko smiled, then using his chakra, he quickly moved his carving knife and wrote Uchiha Obito. Try it yourself. At the same time, the three children who had left Masahiko's shop parted ways, and each went to his home. Kakashi carried the sculpture that Masahiko gave to him, frowning. The way that old man have talked seemed weird to him. Kakashi didn't notice anything wrong with him when he was there, but now after he walked out, he was a little confused. So Konoha's famous sculptor is a reclusive ninja? Why, I've never heard of this before. Could it be that he's from another village? Kakashi, you're back. Sakuma's voice interrupted his thoughts. Father, you came early today? As an umbu, Sakumo is usually very busy. Sakumo nodded and noticed the sculptor in Kakashi's hand. Did you go to the Amazon store? Kakashi was surprised, only to remember later that his father also had such a sculpture. Father, do you know that the owner of the Amazon store is a reclusive ninja? The corner of Sakuma's mouth twitched, not knowing what the hell Masahiko was playing again. He reluctantly nodded after a long while. I know, he's a very strong ninja too. Why did you go there? So, he's really a ninja? Kakashi looked surprised. The clown of our class has become his carving disciple. Uchiha Obito? Sakumo obviously knew about this nickname from Kakashi, learning carving, hey. Because Masahiko would often do things he can't understand, he believed Kakashi's story, but in his heart, he knew that Masahiko wouldn't do such a thing just to teach him carving. But this time, he missed the target. Masahiko didn't accept him as a disciple. He just accepted Obito as Hago Romo's apprentice to add some fun to the shop. Also he really liked kids, and this one is very funny and stupid, a good mix. Masahiko smirked as he looked at Obito, struggling with the stone in his hand. Obito's current strength is really off the standards. He couldn't even master the 3 basic ninjutsu, let alone transmitting his chakra into the carving knife. Masahiko has added a lot of chakra conductive metal into the blade of this carving knife. Obito should easily be able to pour his chakra into it, but controlling it another story. Done. Obito shouted, then collapsed on the ground, with sweat all over his forehead. Masahiko looked at it again and again, then he smiled helplessly. What is this? I can barely read it. He put the stone away, planning to keep it for 2 years to see if Obito could recognize the carving characters by then. After that, under the desperate gazes of Obito, Masahiko brought 2 more stones from nowhere. Carry on. However, Obito lost his spirit and seemed unwilling to keep practicing. Masahiko smiled, I wonder what that girl would think of you if she saw how you're working so hard. Obito, full of new blood, instantly jumped up again and continued his endless struggle with the new stone. Until half an hour later, he collapsed on the ground again, refusing to get up. Masahiko looked at the 5 stones carved with the name Uchiha Obito and tried to use his Rin style, again, but it was no longer sufficient. Sensing his body, Obito's had no chakra left inside, so Masahiko couldn't help but nod in satisfaction. Okay, let's stop here today. Remember that since you've carved 6 stones this time, next time when you come, you must break this record, and so on. Masahiko was trying to strengthen Obito's chakra control and extend his chakra reserve, and this way was all he could think of. Hearing this bad news, Obito couldn't get himself to stand up again, and with watering eyes, he swore that he will never help a grandpa cross the road again. After a long time, Obito finally recovered some of his strength and asked, "Did we finish carving today?" Masahiko was startled. "Why, are you still willing to carry on?" Obito shook his head quickly, then hesitated before asking, "Can you teach me ninjutsu?" Masahiko felt helpless. Since that time he heard that he was a senior ninja, Obito started getting this idea. "You want to beat Hatake Kakashi?" Obito was startled, then nodded quickly. "Do you think Kakashi is that strong just by relying on talent?" Jiraiya is the right example for this, and Masahiko believed that anyone can reach the highest level just by effort alone. "I asked you to carve one piece of stone, and you wanted to give up. If I didn't keep mentioning that girl to you, it would have been impossible to complete the other 5 stones behind you. If it were Kakashi, he would have continued to sculpt to his limit, without stopping at all, and he will persist until he runs out of strength." Masahiko smartly changed the concept here. After all, there is a difference between practicing ninjutsu and carving. Obito pondered for a moment, then got all excited again. "I see." Masahiko snickered. Brainwashing succeeded. Although Obito's main strength is his Sharingan eyes, his taijutsu and ninjutsu were strong in the mid and late stages of the original, which proves that his talent isn't actually much lower than Kakashi. But now he was almost a year older and way weaker. On the one hand, he didn't have someone like Sakumo to guide him, and on the other, he also lacked the ambition to work harder. Obito quickly cheered up and looked at Masahiko. "Master, I still don't know your name yet. You must have been a great ninja before." Masahiko smiled. "My name is Hage Oromo, you might not have heard of it." Obito nodded. "When I go back, I will ask the seniors in my clan, they must have heard of you." Masahiko quickly stopped him. "No, don't mention the past, a shinobi's life will always be full of unexpected storms. In short, I live in seclusion here, and I'm happy with that, so don't publicize it. This can cause a lot of unwanted troubles." Obito nodded. "I see." Seeing that he still wants to ask, Masahiko quickly interrupted. "I see that you've recovered enough strength to run your mouth. Why don't you use it to practice? Didn't you say that you want to beat Kakashi?" "Oh yes, practice, practice." Chapter 193, Kakashi's Graduation. Half a year later. Amazon shop. "I've finished it, master!" Obito shouted, and Masahiko, who was about to fall asleep, got startled suddenly. 100 stones, that's quite impressive." Masahiko nodded, looking at the many stones in front of him, he couldn't help but smile. Looking at the very first stone, then at this one he just finished, he could clearly read the words Uchiha Obito, whether it was chakra volume or his control, all have improved a lot. Of course. Obito looked proud and seemed like he wanted to hear more. Masahiko's face darkened secretly. In fact, his chakra volume didn't improve that much, but as his control got better, he learned how to save it. And the only thing he accomplished during these 6 months is how to carve his name on a stone. Looking at how he was seeking praise, Masahiko didn't feel like turning him down. "Good job. Let's move on to the second step." Obito's expression immediately went from 10 to 0, "The second step? The first one took me half a year. How many steps are there?" Masahiko smiled. 3 steps, the first step was the brainwashing well, a total of 4 steps. Obito looked blank. "Brainwashing? It's nothing." Masahiko immediately turned away from the topic, took another stone behind him, covered it with his palm, focused on it, then used the earth release to completely change its structure. "Hi! It's just another stone." As an expert of stones, Obito, who was dealing with them for half a year, said disappointedly. "Just try it." Masahiko smirked and started talking nonsense. "This is a stone I brought back from the world's highest peak. Believe me, it's different." With a look of admiration, "The highest peak of the world? Master, you actually went there? How was it? Can we go there together someday?" Masahiko's face became stiff. He obviously just picked a random stone from the ground. This child's brain circuits were not normal. "It's gone. After I climbed it, I found out that the scenery wasn't that good, so I wiped the mountain away with one shot of my wind release." Masahiko sighed. Obito looked at him with awe. "Master, you're so amazing." Masahiko felt a little embarrassed. How could this kid be so honest? Don't think about these trivial matters, you need to practice now. Obito naturally picked up his carving knife, poured his chakra into it, and blue energy wrapped the blade, and when he tried to carve his name, his expression suddenly froze. Master, why is this stone so hard? Masahiko waved his hand. Come on, put more effort into it, didn't you eat well this morning? Obito felt as if he was carving for the first time. And after he finished carving the stone, he was already sweating. But this time, he clenched his teeth and forced himself not to fall down, then he sat on the ground and caught his breath. Master, are the stones on the highest peak of the world this hard? It's amazing that you wiped out the entire mountain. Obito's admiration for Masahiko grew even more. Masahiko glanced at him, shook his head helplessly, then looked at the door. Get up, your sweetheart is here, isn't it shameful to let her see you sitting on the ground like this? Obito blushed, then he immediately turned over, stood up, and then walked a few steps to the door to look around. Where? Turning around, he found Masahiko carrying 2 more stones in his hand, which made his face stiff. Master, these aren't the peak of the world stones again, right? Masahiko didn't explain, since you still have strength, let's do 2 more. Obito sighed, then he picked up his carving knife again. After half an hour, done. This time, Obito didn't care about his image and lay directly on the ground. Masahiko, who was about to scold him, suddenly glanced at the door, then smirked. Is it okay to lie on the ground like this? Your sweetheart is here. Obito took a breath and smiled, you won't fool me twice. Obito, why are you lying on the ground? The moment Rin's voice came, Obito's smile froze on his face. He kept looking back and forth at Masahiko's smirky smile and Rin's smiling face, then screamed, ah! He jumped up and quickly patted the dust off his body. Rin, why are you here? Rin's expression changed slightly. It seems that only then she remembered her purpose and immediately gently pulled Obito by his right hand. Let's go to school, Kakashi has applied for graduation. Kakashi is graduating? Isn't he the same age as us? Really? Really? The two rushed out, leaving Masahiko alone in the store with a wry smile. This apprentice doesn't take me seriously as a master. But since Kakashi graduating, I will have to go there too. Masahiko closed the door of his store, and without changing his appearance, he went directly to the Ninja Academy, only to find that he went there for nothing. The examination is at the Hokage building? Will Hiruzen be there in person? That's really something. Well, you can't blame him. Kakashi is the first child to apply for graduation at the age of 5. Masahiko came to the Hokage building, and there was already a group of children surrounding the place. Obito and Rin were among them. They seemed to be waiting for the result. Obito was the most nervous, and he wouldn't have noticed Masahiko if it wasn't for Rin. Master, you're here too. Obito said, feeling guilty. The moment he heard that Kakashi was applying for graduation, he left without even saying goodbye. Masahiko smiled, you came to congratulate Kakashi on becoming a genin? Obito's face stiffened, we don't even know that he will pass. But he did. Upon saying that, the door was opened, and Kakashi walked out. There was no need for others to ask, the protector on his forehead explained it all, and Masahiko obtained his 10 witness points. One after another, the kids came to him and congratulated him, but Obito was still there standing beside Masahiko. Why don't you go and congratulate Kakashi? I don't want to. Kakashi walked over instead of Obito. Elder. He first greeted Masahiko, then he glanced at Obito. The two looked at each other, and suddenly they reproduced Masahiko's sculptures, which made the latter laugh out loud. Without saying anything, Kakashi walked by Obito with a cold and arrogant expression, and Rin with a group of other children chased after him. With a bitter expression, Obito clenched his fist and looked at the Hokage building in front of him. No, I also want to apply for graduation. Masahiko was stunned and quickly grabbed him, fearing that he's gonna embarrass himself. After more than half a year of carving, Obito's level was close to being enough for graduation. In case he got lucky, in fact, graduation isn't a dream. Thinking of this, Masahiko let go of Obito and added, Kakashi has graduated. But no one in Konoha ever heard of you and you carefree master before. Are you sure it's the right choice to apply for graduation now? Obito looked so surprised. Master, you're so wise. Masahiko felt like he has been stabbed again. Chapter 194, The Reappearance of Flying Thunder God. Masahiko has been waiting for Kakashi's graduation for more than half a year, and during that period, he held back his team from taking any missions. Now that he got his 10 witness points, Masahiko gathered the three of them, ready to find Hiruzen and ask him for another A-class mission. But, Grandpa Masahiko, can you wait for half a month before going out on a mission? Kushina asked with a twisted face. Why, you've already been with Minato for half a year now. What are you two planning to do in this half a month? Masahiko laughed. No, it's just that Minato said that he's gonna complete his technique in about half a month. I want to see his new technique with my own eyes. Masahiko was startled. He's gonna finish the Flying Thunder God in just a half year? During this period, he heard from Kushina that Minato was working on the Flying Thunder God, but he thought it would take him at least 2 or 3 years. How? I remember that it took him 3 years to learn the Rasengan. Oh yes, he developed the Rasengan, Masahiko thought, then looked at 3 children in front of him. Since Minato is about to finish his training so soon, he can't just go, maybe it will also yield him some witness points. Very well, the two of you disband. The 2 kids looked dumbfounded. I mean, go back to your houses, each forget it, just go to work on your own. Kushina, let's go see Minato. The team had just assembled after a long time, then got disbanded in a minute. And Masahiko followed Kushina to find Minato. Flying Thunder God is a very special space ninjutsu, which is way different from other ordinary techniques. When Minato first started practicing it, he just learned at home how to create its special seal and make it last longer. The second step is to understand the concept of how to teleport the body through space. According to Kushina, the first 2 steps were successfully completed by Minato, and the final step is in progress, so he was really about to finish his training. The final step is to apply the Flying Thunder God to actual combat, and to learn how to use it quickly, and multiple times at a long distance before it can be considered successfully learned. Masahiko was very clear about this theoretical knowledge. He actually studied it for a while, but he failed to complete the second step. He simply didn't have the talent, nor did the skill didn't appear in his system. In short, since Minato has reached the final stage of training, he needed to be there to see it. Masahiko followed Kushina to a familiar and unfamiliar place, the Death Forest. Although it's the most famous location in the original, this was the first time for Masahiko to come here. The Death Forest is located at the southeast corner of Konoha. It also has the training ground number 44. There are only 44 training grounds in Konoha. Generally, few ninjas come here to practice ninjutsu, but the best place to practice Flying Thunder God is in such a complex terrain. Masahiko found Minato's chakra at the periphery of the Death Forest, with Jiraiya nearby. He smiled and walked over. Fellow writer, why are you not at home? Over 6 months have passed, and Jiraiya still didn't finish his first book. Old elder. Jiraiya has almost called him old devil again. Thanks to you, I lost all of my inspiration. Masahiko was still confused by that incident and immediately panicked. What? Are you saying that you've changed your sexual interest? Jiraiya. A moment of awkwardness controlled the atmosphere, then both looked at Minato not far away. Konoha's yellow flash, although it's still not that clear, it's almost perfect, Masahiko exclaimed. Jiraiya said proudly, since the second Hokage, Minato is the first shinobi to ever learn the Flying Thunder God, and he's indeed my disciple. Masahiko glanced at him, that's because Minato is highly talented. It has nothing to do with you being his teacher. Jiraiya. While they were talking, Minato stopped his training and walked over with Kushina. Elder Masahiko, you're here. Masahiko nodded, his gaze was placed on the special Flying Thunder God kunai in his hand, which Minato immediately handed it over the moment he noticed his stares. It seems a little different from the one I created for Tobirama. So you're the one who created it for the second Hokage, do you have another copy? Hearing that Jiraiya asked. Masahiko frowned, I thought Hiruzen has it. Don't tell me he didn't agree on give it to Minato for reference. Jiraiya shook his head, no, sensei didn't have it, he said it was buried with Tobirama-sama. Masahiko was surprised and nodded. He didn't attend the funeral of Tobirama, so he really didn't know. I don't have one, but I remember that he gifted one to Tsunade during her first birthday party. Jiraiya was taken aback and looked at Minato. Don't worry, kid, I will go and get it over later. Minato shook his head. No, sensei, I know what's lacking, so I will change it myself. Jiraiya also smiled and glanced at Masahiko with the look of my disciple is amazing. Masahiko didn't bother to pay attention to him and poured his chakra into the flying thunder god kunai in his hand, then threw it to the sky. Space style, flying thunder god Masahiko's face turned dark. He could pour his chakra into the kunai, of course, but he can't teleport to the seal since he doesn't even understand the concept of the space teleportation. Jiraiya laughed aloud. It was the first time that he had the chance to mock Masahiko. Special substitute technique, Masahiko muttered silently, and he instantly appeared in the position of the kunai. Jiraiya's laugh froze, and pointed at him. Do you too? Why are you so surprised? Masahiko replied with a smirk. It's not like that, sensei. Minato bent over and picked his kunai from the ground. Elder Masahiko must have used a technique similar to the substitute technique just now to swap positions with the kunai. Masahiko sighed. Jiraiya, you see how smart your disciple is, don't you feel ashamed for being his sensei? Grandpa Masahiko, who don't you accept Minato as your disciple? Kushina was worried too. Jiraiya felt depressed, but fortunately, Minato comforted him quickly. For the next week, Masahiko accompanied Kushina every day to watch Minato's training, until he was able to use it proficiently and even compete with Jiraiya, then his practice officially came to an end. Fortunately, this week didn't go in vain, and Masahiko got his 10 witness points in the end. All assemble! After a long time, Masahiko finally had the chance to take his team on a mission, and in fact, he felt really excited. Kushina, go call Nagato and Konan, we're going for a mission. Chapter 195, Purchasing Herbs. The team assembled for the second time, and nothing was gonna delay them this time. And the four immediately went to the hokage building. Huh? Why is Danzo also here? Masahiko frowned slightly, sensing that Danzo was also there with Hiruzen. Elder Masahiko, you're here. Hiruzen greeted him. Do you want to take another mission? Masahiko nodded and glanced inside. What are you two discussing? Hiruzen hesitated. According to the intelligence, Kumigakure has just selected the 4th Raikage. Masahiko was startled, but there was no surprise. Since that battle 10 years ago, Kumigakure has kept a low profile, and even though they didn't have a Raikage, they let the Ibis Jinchuriki take charge of the village, but the latter was never named a Raikage. 10 years later, they were ready to stand on the stage again and return to the shinobi world. So I's little son I has grown up, and he's now in his 20s? Masahiko muttered, feeling a bit awkward calling both father and son I. Seeing the opposite side's hesitation, Masahiko smiled. Don't pretend, you two didn't want me to know, fearing that I would go, but you should have known better. That will only make me more excited to go. Hiruzen smiled wryly. No. Finally, Danzo came from the inside and stood beside Hiruzen at the door, and the latter's face seemed to be finally at ease. Masahiko glared. What are you two hiding? Danzo went back. Hiruzen helplessly said, please come in. Masahiko walked in with the 3 children, smiled, and said, don't worry, I won't go to Kumigakure. They haven't cut off the supplies in the past 10 years. As long as things remain as before, the stronger they would be, the better for us. Elder Masahiko, we are just worried that if Kumigakure recovers. Masahiko waved his hand, interrupting Hiruzen's words. It's okay, I won't go to Kumigakure for the time being, because if I do, they will have to find another Raikage. Masahiko recalled the temper of I in the original and thought it was better if he doesn't go. I brought my small team here to pick a mission. It's September now, so don't you dare give me that speech about how the National Day is approaching, and there aren't enough missions. National Day? Hiruzen looked confused. It's okay, hurry up and give me a task. Can't you see how my team is eager to go? Hiruzen picked up a stack of papers, looked at one, then at Masahiko, shook his head, and put it down. Masahiko's face darkened. What is that supposed to mean? Manipulating the gravity, the paper on the table floated over. Procurement task? Masahiko was taken aback. Hiruzen nodded. This mission isn't suitable, it takes a long time, and basically, there are no battles. Why do I feeling like you've deliberately wanted me to see this task? Masahiko isn't stupid. These kinds of purchases between villages are usually dispatched directly, why would he put such a task in that pile? Masahiko put his hand on his chin like Detective Conan. This task has details about the purchasing materials. It seems like Konoha is about to purchase a lot of iron and rare metals, which means that you're trying to inform me indirectly that the shinobi world has entered a state of war readiness, and Konoha has spent a lot of materials to buy metal. Next, you're gonna cry and ask me to sell you the explosive tags of the land of whirlpools at a low price, and if that didn't work you will try to convince me that now isn't the right time to sell to other countries. After all, they may become the Uzumaki and Konoha's enemies soon. Hiruzen's face stiffened, and looked at Danzo. Masahiko clicked 12 likes for his enormous IQ, then turned to look back at the three children. The unexpected admiration of Nagato and Konan made him very pleased. But, Kushina, what do you mean by that expression that seems to be saying, is this my grandpa? Sorry, grandpa, I was just surprised by your reasoning. After a long while, Hiruzen smiled bitterly and said, Elder Masahiko, you're just overthinking. The explosion tags we bought before is enough. This procurement was only released in the form of a task because it takes too long, and there aren't any suitable candidates to take it. Masahiko glanced at him with a smile. He didn't believe his claims, but he still took the pile of mission in Hiruzen's hand and randomly drew out one. After two glanced, Masahiko looked at Hiruzen and smiled. What a coincidence, it's another procurement task. This time it was medicinal materials. Masahiko quickly looked through a few. Except for one escort mission, all were procurement tasks. The purchased materials were varied and coincidentally, they were all A-level missions. Danzo tried to cool the situation down, and came over, Elder Masahiko, it's just happened that when we needed to purchase these supplies, you came over to take a mission. Yes, it's all a coincidence. Compared with Hiruzen, Danzo had the ability to sell his lies. Masahiko smiled, it's okay, I'll take a procurement task, so bring the money. At that moment even Danzo's expression froze on his face. He regretted everything, and started to feel uneasy about sending Masahiko to purchase the goods. Hiruzen quickly emphasized, Elder Masahiko, these places are very far away, and there is basically no combat. It's okay, I'll just take them to relax. It's not good to practice blindly. Masahiko made his choice, I'll take this one, the medicinal materials. I haven't been in Nanakusa Island before. It just happened that it's quite troublesome for you to cross the sea, and I'm the only flying ninja here. Masahiko stretched out his hand as if he's hurriedly asking them for the money. After a long while, Hiruzen sighed, I'll get it for you later. Are you sure you want to take this task, though? Masahiko looked behind him, and the three excitedly nodded. Combat isn't always important. Such a task will yield them useful knowledge for the future. I'll take it. Okay, the herbs you need to bring are the energy carrot, the hell valley, the mandra grass, the giant motto. Masahiko's face stiffened, he never knew these things because he never needed them. Sensei, I know them all. Konan behind him said, Tsunade-sama taught me these things, some are good for making pills, and others are used for antidotes. Masahiko smiled, he just dodged Hiruzen's final shot. Sure enough, with a slightly darkened face, Hiruzen placed the money and a map on the table. These should be enough. In addition to the supplies you're gonna purchase, the island itself should be filled with wild herbs. With this map Hiruzen suddenly sighed, he knew now why Masahiko took the medicinal task, he won't buy anything with the money. Masahiko waved his hand, don't worry, I will bring you enough herbs. With that, Masahiko turned and left, followed by the three children. Let's go, I'm taking you out for a trip. He obviously didn't take this mission seriously, to him, it was just a special spiritual journey. When the four of them walked away, Hiruzen breathed a sigh of relief and looked at Danzo. That's okay, even if he takes the money. At least we know Elder Masahiko would take care of this one. Danzo shook his head, I'm afraid we've made a mistake. We should have written more materials, knowing him, Elder Masahiko will bring most of the herbs back to the land of the whirlpool. Chapter 196, Skateboard. Masahiko took the three children out of the hokage building but didn't go back to pack up things. They were already ready to go, so they headed straight to Konoha's main gate. Happy this time? I originally wanted you to gain some combat experience, but it turned out to be a spiritual journey, Masahiko said with a smile. He said so, but he was really considering making the mission harder like last time. Kushina saw through it. I hope there will be no accidents like last time, Grandpa. When she said accidents, her eyes glowed with fire. Masahiko smiled nervously and pretended like he didn't hear her. At the entrance of Konoha, Masahiko's team met Jiraiya, who was also ready to go on a spiritual journey. What's the matter, great writer? Are you going out to collect materials? Jiraiya nodded. Are you taking them out on a mission? Before you finish publishing, don't forget to tell me. As a senior writer, I can help you out. Jiraiya curled his lips. Obviously, he didn't believe in his skills, but he had no choice but to nod in the end. After exchanging a few simple words, Masahiko rose to the sky with the little three. After all, the destination this time was a bit far away. If they walked and took a boat, it would take them at least half a month. Although it would be much fun to travel, after Masahiko looked at the map Hiruzen gave him, he felt that spending that time on the island would be more interesting. In this way, Masahiko took the three across the mountains and the sea, and in just half a day, they were there in Nanakusa Island. Although the ocean in Naruto World isn't very big, there are really many small islands. During the flight, the four passed over several uninhabited islands. We didn't encounter any islands last time when we took the explosions roads, Masahiko muttered, looking north. They flew over with great fanfare, and of course, the ninjas on the island noticed them approaching quickly. Who are you? When they came closer, the other party looked vigilant, because neither Masahiko nor the other three were wearing ninja outfits. On the other hand, the four ninjas from Nanakusa were wearing ninja outfits and forehead protectors. They were also carrying 4 baskets full of herbs behind them. Also there were skateboard hanging on each of them. A small country is always small. Don't you even recognize the great master Uzumaki Masahiko? Masahiko sighed and gestured to Kushina to talk. We came here from Konoha village and we want to collect some herbs from this island. Kushina never suffered from stage fright, but Masahiko's 2 disciples were still a bit shy. The 4 ninjas from Nanakusa looked at each other, then one of them took off his basket. What herbs do you need? While speaking, he took down the skateboard and turned it over. It was actually an abacus. Of course, it's not a skateboard. Masahiko smiled helplessly, but the back of this abacus was flat, and the front had small rollers, so technically. The lead ninja was waiting for one of them to reply, so he was focused on Kushina, who spoke earlier, to suddenly find that the abacus disappeared from his hands. Masahiko quickly put it down on the ground, stepped on it, to find that it could really slide. What are you doing? The 4 looked wary and took their kunao out of their pockets. It's okay, I don't want to buy medicines anymore. How much for this skateboard? In the end, Hiruzen's money got them 4 skateboards, and of course, one of them was for Masahiko. The 4 ninjas from Nanakusa looked at him as if he was a fool, but Masahiko didn't care. The money he gave him wasn't much anyway, and he initially wasn't planning on buying some medicine and leave right away. Several places on the island seemed to be interesting, so he was planning on taking a tour. Looking at the 4 ninjas on the opposite side, Masahiko said, "We have run out of money. So will it be okay to look around and collect some medicinal materials by ourselves?" What? They really didn't get it. They thought that he was just a foolish rich man, who didn't care about money, but now he's saying that he doesn't have any more money. Yes, you can do as you please. However, try not to pull out the roots together with restorative materials. Masahiko nodded, I know, cutting it won't harm the roots, and it will regenerate again in the spring. The 4 nodded, then left away. Judging by how he managed to take the abacus from them without noticing, they knew that this guy should be very strong, but he still paid for it. He's the kind of ninja who isn't looking to cause troubles. Masahiko's team moved together, then he looked at the 3 children, holding their skateboards confusedly. Why are you guys so confused? Masahiko slid left and right, step on the skateboard and follow me to gather medicines. The 2 disciples were very obedient and immediately stepped on the skateboard, while Kushina swore that she would never ever follow Masahiko out to do a mission again. But in the end, she forgot everything she said after the 4 of them embarked on a joyful journey of collecting medicine on the skateboards. Well, it wasn't that happy. Except for Konan, none of them knew the medicinal materials. Masahiko took the approach of tasting with his mouth, and of course, Nagato followed. As a result, within half an hour, Nagato suffered severe explosive diarrhea. He didn't have Masahiko's physique after all. Of course, Kushina wasn't so naive. She kept close to Konan and tried hard to learn how to identify medicinal materials. Masahiko has eaten many medicinal materials, and in a few hours, his face looked so pale. He wasn't poisoned, but pharmaceutical LV1, 0/100. It's not just for the identification of medicinal materials. This will also help me make medicine. Isn't this something useful I can add to my Amazon store? Masahiko shook his head and decided to temporarily put this skill aside. The four of them gathered herbs until they reached the island's depths and came to a cliff. Just as Masahiko wanted to fly over with the three children, he found a wooden bridge not far away. Did those ninjas who gather medicines build it? Masahiko walked to the wooden bridge, and just when he was about to step in, "Sensei, be careful!" Konan's shout came and startled Masahiko. Looking left and right, there was no danger. Masahiko's face darkened. "Konan, this isn't the right time to make jokes." "That's not the case, Sensei, those plants entwined on the bridge's ropes should be paralyzing grass." "Paralyzing grass?" Masahiko was taken aback. He heard of such a thing before. It was said that it could paralyze most ninjas. Masahiko touched the ropes with his right hand, and he felt a slight numbness. "It can even affect me a little?" Masahiko frowned, and suddenly got an idea. "The three of you put down the skateboards, and come here, I came out with a special practice." The three looked clueless, and Masahiko explained, "Try to use chakra to protect your body from the paralyzing grass and walk across this wooden bridge." He then glanced at the bottom and continued, "I won't help any of you. Although there is water underneath, I don't think any of you would want to fall down." The three refused to do it first, but how could they possibly say no to Masahiko? And one by one, they started crossing the bridge. Masahiko was first. Although there was no direct contact, the body still stiffened. Fortunately, his hands were covered with a layer of chakra as protection, and finally, step by step, he walked towards the other side. Masahiko turned over, squinting his eyes. "It looks like this paralyzing grass can be useful." Chapter 197, The Hell Valley. On the other side of the wooden bridge, the three children slumped on the ground. The wooden bridge is only less than 30 meters long, but it took them half an hour to cross it, especially the relatively weak Konan. If it weren't for Masahiko's slight gravitational help, she wouldn't have succeeded. Sure enough, as rumored, the paralyzing grass can affect even a Jonin. Nagato and Kushina can barely count as Chunin, though. If you touch it without chakra, even I will feel it, so I think I better get rid of it. Masahiko directly took off the grass entangled on the bridge's ropes with his hands. After he personally sealed all the paralyzing grass into a scroll, Masahiko walked forward, followed by three children with satisfaction. "How was it? Do you feel better now?" Masahiko smiled. This was a great learning opportunity. From now on, you will always be psychologically prepared if you ever encountered someone who uses the paralyzing grass. Nagato and Konan immediately agreed, and Kushina sighed helplessly. She saw Masahiko saving the scroll in his pocket, and had a bad premonition for future training. Masahiko turned to say something but noticed that they were still tired. He sensed their state, then he squinted his eyes. 10 minutes to rest, then we will continue." "Sensei, there should be crimson newts in the stream here, shouldn't we catch a few?" Konan asked in confusion. Masahiko's face stiffened. "Living salamanders, I remember that. What kind of herbal medicine uses a living fire-belly Chinese newt? Is it for the military rations pill?" Masahiko's face sighed inwardly. "Thank God that I've never had to eat those pills before. It feels a little disgusting. Koji can really eat anything. Since it's a living thing, let's grab it when we come back. Let's go to see the dangerous area marked on the map first, the Hell Valley. The name is really powerful and terrifying." Konan hesitated, but still didn't say that she didn't want to die. She was also a little bit resistant to things like salamanders. After resting for more than 10 minutes, the three recovered. Although they still felt stiff, they could already walk smoothly. After 2 kilometers, they came to the Hell Valley area marked on the map. "A cave?" Masahiko frowned and walked inside with the three children. The cave wasn't too deep. Only less than 100 meters ahead, they saw a swamp. It's said that the elixir mud here is very effective for healing bruises, cuts, and sprains. "Let's get some." As soon as Masahiko finished speaking, he noticed some blue steam spraying out in front. This is Masahiko suddenly looked shocked. He has been in this world of 100 years, and this was the first time he sees such a thing, toxic gas. Frowning, Masahiko quickly stopped Nagato and Konan, who wanted to step forward. The gas toxicity isn't low, and even he wasn't sure that he can inhale more than a few breaths without being poisoned. The gas should be colorless and tasteless under normal circumstances. Since it's blue, it means that the gas is impure and may be easier to burn or even explode. Masahiko hesitated for a while, smiled, then explained to the three children a little about the characteristics of gas. Not that he didn't want to talk more and look cool, but he didn't know much. Special Training Part 2. Find a way to collect the mud, but be careful. After saying these words, Masahiko stepped back a few meters, then observed the three children using their brains. Nagato was the first to make a trial. He used multiple shadow clones and they rushed to the toxic gas. Although the casualties were heavy, finally, one of them reached the elixir mud's edge. Before he could even get happy, he went puff, by the mud's corrosive power. Masahiko was taken aback too. This thing is corrosive, how would they make healing medicines out of it? Is Hiruzen playing tricks on me? Later, he thought that it might not be impossible. There should be a way to use it. He almost couldn't help but adding a few points to the pharmaceutical skill. No, I can't waste my points. After they learned the pattern, Nagato used the shadow clone to test. This time, one of the clones passed successfully and collected some marsh mud after he sealed it in a scroll, but the ground suddenly trembled, and a behemoth suddenly emerged from the ground and directly ate Nagato's shadow clone with the sealing scroll. Masahiko was stunned from a moment. It wasn't a surprise that it appeared, after all, he had already sensed it earlier. But what this monster looks like? Is this the ancestor of the newts? Masahiko felt a sudden chill. Okay. Special Training Part 3. Go and grab the ancestor of the newts, and sell it to Konoha. We should be able to sell this for a good price. Masahiko whispered at the end. But the size of the monster was not much smaller than the cave itself. The three children were fighting under challenging conditions. They had to fight the newt boss, avoid the swamps, and use wind release to blow away the poisonous gas from time to time. For a while, the danger was all around them. This isn't going to work. Masahiko frowned and took a few steps forward. You don't need to worry about the gas, I will keep it away from you, as long as you hit this big newt hard. This time the three children could finally move freely and focus on the battle. Compared to when they went to the sea, Nagato and Konan have made a lot of progress. However, during the battle, Kushina was the one facing Newt boss face to face and leading the team. The Newt's boss seemed to have noticed that the situation went sideways, so he tried to run into the ground, but almost crushed his skull in the process because Masahiko had secretly used earth release to reinforce it. "Hi, got you!" Masahiko shouted. The battle continued, and after resisting a few ninjutsu, he tried again to run to the cave's exit but was kicked back by Masahiko. 10 minutes later, it stopped the struggle and surrendered its life, making an end to this frustrating battle. As soon as the three children breathed a sigh of relief, they heard Masahiko say, "Hurry up and collect some of the elixir mud, this cave will collapse in 2 minutes." Going through such a large-scale battle, the cave would have collapsed if it wasn't supported by Masahiko's repulsive force. Just after collecting the mud, they watched the cave collapse little by little from the inside out. "Run!" Masahiko yelled. The three children were taken aback, then hurriedly rushed out of the cave. Like a warehouse exploding in a police movie, the three protagonists run toward the exit in slow motion, and every time they crossed a small distance, it collapsed behind them. The moment they went through the exit, the cave behind them collapsed, and the shock wave launched the three for a few meters. Masahiko walked with a smile toward the three children, who were still lying on the ground, and smiled. After a while, they raised their head to find that the giant salamander was also there behind him, but none of them knew when he managed to grab it. "Well done, this trip in our special training ended perfectly." Kushina, who was covered with mud, clenched her teeth, then said, "Grandpa, I just wanted to know how did the cave collapse part by part until we reached the exit." Masahiko scoffed, "Well, I'm not sure. When I go back, I will look it up in the geological books." "Huh? Even Sensei doesn't know?" Boom. She endured it for days now, but Kushina had enough of Nagato's naivete and knocked his head severely. Chapter 198, Live to be Old. Under the wooden bridge. Beside the stream. The three kids were washing off the mud on their faces. Because the cave was blasted by Masahiko, the three got completely dirty, but they couldn't clean their bodies since they were in the wilderness. Well, we've finished our mission anyway. Let's pack up and return to Konoha. Masahiko tried to act innocent, but Kushina, who was angry, never raised her eyes on him. Konan hesitated, but sensei, we don't have enough restorative materials. Masahiko smiled and took out 2 sealing scrolls. We actually do, don't underestimate your sensei, these 2 should be enough. Although his pharmacy skill was only level 1, it was more than enough to identify these simple medicinal materials, and unknowingly, he ended up collecting 2 full sealing scrolls. Then let's go back, Grandpa, Kushina said, as the Uzumaki Kingdom's little princess, although she wasn't spoiled, she still couldn't stand dirt on her body. Masahiko nodded, elevated the 3 of them, then flew up again, heading toward Konoha, while smiling. The 4 ninjas suddenly appeared at their footmark, to find that they have left the skateboards behind. Brother, they left, and they didn't even bother grabbing the abacus with them. Yes, but we made hundreds of thousands of ryo because of them. I wonder why did they left them, though? In the air, Masahiko smirked. He wouldn't really use real money to buy it if he was gonna leave it. He just took a few leaves and used his transformation technique on it to make it look like money. It is estimated that tomorrow they will freak out when it turns back to leaves. But he left the abacus for them, so it should be fine. Usually, flying back should be smoother, but since he was carrying the dead old ancestor of salamanders, aka not Hanzo, his speed was slower. Sensei, is the one in your hand really a newt? Konan hesitated and asked. Masahiko was stunned for a moment, then looked uncertain. It should be, so what if it's a little bigger? It doesn't matter if it changes the taste of the pills. This was actually very irresponsible, he didn't care because he doesn't use the military rations pill. Masahiko didn't land when they reached Konoha's main gate. With that thing floating behind them, they wouldn't let him pass, so he simply flew directly to the hokage building. And with that, the 2.5-day long-term mission came to an end. Hiruzen, come out to receive the good, I brought you a salamander, Masahiko shouted with a smile. Hiruzen came out with a serious expression, and even said solemnly, Elder Masahiko, you are back. Masahiko was taken aback, what's wrong? The Third Shinobi World War broke out? Hiruzen shook his head, it's news from the Uzumaki, the daimyo of the Land of Whirlpools is ill. What? Grandfather? Masahiko and Kushina were stunned. Hiruzen nodded solemnly. Grandpa Kushina became anxious all at once. Masahiko patted her head and looked at Hiruzen, did Nanako return? Yes. Masahiko nodded, took out the sealing scroll from his sleeves, and threw it over, then he flew again with the 3 kids, heading straight to the Land of Whirlpools. It has been less than a year since I last saw him. Gensuke is only 65 years old. Masahiko felt sad and sorry for Kushina. 3 kids were speechless, and none of them talked. The 3 were still covered with dust, but even Kushina didn't feel like cleaning up now. In just half an hour, they returned to the country under the constant acceleration of Masahiko. Nagato, Konan, you should go back and clean up first. I will go with Kushina. Masahiko took Kushina directly to the daimyo palace entrance, ignoring the guards' various greetings to him, and went straight into the palace. Sensei, you're back. Yuriko greeted him first. How is Gensuke? Masahiko had already sensed how weak is his chakra, but he still asked, hoping he was wrong. As expected, Yuriko bitterly shook her head, and Kushina immediately rushed in. Masahiko sighed but didn't stop her. What happened exactly? We thought he was just tired. Although the 2 always quarreled, Yuriko never hated Gensuke, and she looked really sad. But that wasn't the case. Masahiko has never been interested in Gensuke. His mind never matched his ambitions, and he also doesn't have the tenacity that a ninja should have. But after so many years, Masahiko found out that he could count on him. Thanks to that man's effort, the country developed smoothly. Yes, he loved being the daimyo, but you can say he loved this country more. How is Nanako hanging on? I'm fine, sensei. As soon as Masahiko asked, Nanako walked out of the room, looking not as sad as Masahiko imagined. Masahiko hesitated, he couldn't find any comforting words. He really didn't know what to say. In his previous life, people used to say, live to get old, get sick, then die. But he's really not in the right position to say such a thing. I'm okay, sensei, I'm actually prepared for this day. Nanako shook her head. Before I went to Konoha, I noticed something wrong with him. He was always feeling tired. I told him he should take a break but he disagreed. At that time, I knew such a day will come, but I just didn't expect it to be so soon. Is that so? Masahiko nodded, let's go in. Masahiko didn't see Gensuke for a year, he looked like a different person, old and weak. Gensuke and Nanako's son and daughter-in-law stood aside with Kushina, who was crying her eyes out inside his room. The moment Gensuke saw Masahiko, a smile was drawn on his face, and he nodded to him. Masahiko, who didn't say a word, smiled at him too, and Gensuke closed his eyes with relief. The others quickly gathered around looking at him. Masahiko shook his head helplessly, and smiled bitterly, you didn't get my approval until you were about to die. What's so gratifying, stupid old man? Masahiko didn't know how many times he needed to carry on after saying goodbye to his people. Watching this old man just now dying with a smile didn't actually make it easier. In fact, he was a little depressed. Sensei, I remember you've once told me that human nature is to be born, to live to get old, to get sick, and die. Masahiko never expected that Nanako would be the one comforting him at this time. Live to be old. Masahiko nodded and walked out. Masahiko understood that these words weren't meant to comfort him now. Nanako knew that she and Kanikiro were getting older, and this day will come for them too. It might be 10 years later, or even maybe tomorrow. Either way, Masahiko will be the one who sends them away one by one. It really sucks to live too long, Masahiko said emotionally. He has already sent away many younger generations. The only thing that kept him optimistic is the acquaintances born in succession, but he was really tired of watching people die. Chapter 199, I'll bring them both. The Uzumaki Cemetery. Masahiko personally presided over Gensuke's funeral. Gensuke loved to rule, but never acted as a daimyo. He was more like the patriarch of the land of whirlpools. He didn't mind dealing with common people's affairs, relocation, planting, and of course, the economy. He did everything by himself and never relied on anyone but the patrol team that protected him. Yuriko was the patriarch of the clan, so the two had to work together, although they always quarreled. Initially, it was decided that Yuriko was the one who will be hosting the funeral, but later, when Masahiko saw how many civilians were carrying in grief when they heard of Gensuke's death, he suddenly realized how he indeed made a good name and reputation for the country over the years and decided to preside it personally. He's the daimyo of the land of whirlpools, and he's worthy enough for a funeral hosted by the country's greatest elder. Masahiko sighed, then took the lead to approach and put a few flowers in his open coffin, then stood aside, watching civilians and ninjas orderly approaching. The funeral was presided over by him, but Masahiko still didn't say a word. After all, the flower offering took an entire day. Masahiko, at that moment, couldn't help but say, the entire country came for you today, Gensuke, you don't need my reorganization, when you have all of these people. Although it was late, Masahiko hoped that this will make Gensuke rest in peace. Masahiko murmured softly and directly declared that the funeral was over and asked the patrol team members to help them out of the field. Although the funeral was just over, Masahiko had a lot of things to do. Even though he was old, Masahiko thought that Gensuke could still fill the position for at least 5 more years, or even 10, after which Nagato could grow up and take over the position of daimyo. But now Gensuke suddenly passed away. Nagato was less than 11 years old, it would be too ridiculous to let him take over as a daimyo. Then should I let Kushina's father take it over? Masahiko hesitated. Things are really getting ridiculous. Masahiko doesn't even know Kushina's father's name, unless it's within his small circle. He really doesn't know much and doesn't really care much too. Nanako is his disciple, so he really cares a lot about her. Kushina is Naruto's mother, in fact, she's the mother he always wanted. When he first watched her in the anime, he felt so emotional. However, Kushina's father and Nanako's son, he just knew that there was such a person. Masahiko can't just make him a daimyo based on that, he will never be relieved. I need to hear my disciples' opinions. Kanikiro. Masahiko ignored him and directly went to his 2 female disciples to ask for their opinions. Sensei, Inchin would be a great daimyo. Gensuke has been training him for the past 2 years. Nanako didn't shy away and directly recommended her son, yet Yuriko didn't show any objection. Note, Inchin, a beautiful city in Korea. Masahiko nodded. It seems that he has been preparing for a long time. Inform him to be ready. The position of the daimyo cannot stay empty. Nanako nodded, then hesitated for a moment before saying, after the funeral, Kushina went straight to her room and locked herself in. Sensei, could you please comfort her? Was her relationship with Gensuke that deep? Masahiko was slightly puzzled. Gensuke, as a daimyo, is usually very busy. He shouldn't have much time to spend with Kushina. When he came to the door, he first shouted, Kushina, I'm gonna open the door. After he waited for a few seconds, Masahiko opened the door's lock with gravity and walked in. Kushina was sitting on the bed with her hands on her knees, her eyes were reddish, she didn't look sad, but seemed like she had something troubling her. What's the problem? Masahiko asked. Grandpa, am I being selfish for staying in Konoha all the time to be with Minato? Masahiko was startled, he really didn't expect her to ask such a question. As the princess of the land of whirlpools, I should have my own responsibilities. My grandfather dedicated his entire life to this country, but as the princess of this country, you do have your own responsibilities, but you can't sacrifice your own happiness. Masahiko shook his head. Being a daimyo was very hard on Gensuke, but this is the life he has always wanted, he chose to live it, and he didn't regret it in the end. If you marry Minato, you will be happy, and you will also make the relationship between Konoha and the Uzumaki closer. If this is considered selfish, then Mito is the most selfish person. As the princess of the Uzumaki, she married Hashirama and lived happily since then. Surely the clan would have needed her at times, but they got me. In fact, I also helped to build this strong bond between the Uzumaki and Konoha. Otherwise, this country would have disappeared a long time ago. Kushina looked puzzled, but she married the Senjo patriarch. How is marrying Minato would help to strengthen that bond? Also her eyes were bright and scary. Why can't I just marry Minato and stay here? What? Masahiko was taken aback, then with a dumbfounded expression, he thought, she really dared to think of this. Then he must work harder, and you too. After pondering, Masahiko still encouraged her. Kushina was very quiet for a moment, then she eagerly asked, Grandpa, I want to know what happened a few years ago. You found something wrong with that story? Masahiko asked with a smile. That story had many flaws. The biggest one was how Masahiko didn't retaliate after finding out that it was a Kumagakure shinobi. Kushina nodded, and Masahiko continued to speak. This matter is related to the story I've told you when you were a little girl. Do you mean the Kyuubi? Kushina has known about the Kyuubi for so many years. Masahiko nodded. After all, Mito is old, Konoha needs to find the next Kyuubi's Jinchuriki. Your body is just right, so I told you that story. Is that so? Kushina sighed. Then who kidnapped me? It was an umbu. Kushina's expression changed. Masahiko smiled and comforted, don't worry, Minato didn't know about this, it was completely arranged by Hiruzen and Danzo. Kushina breathed a sigh of relief, and Masahiko continued, because the ultimate goal of this matter is to bring you and Minato together, I didn't pursue it, but I still warned them. Kushina fell silent, then after a long time, she clenched her fist, as if she had made up her mind. Masahiko was startled and said, don't tell me that you're still thinking of bringing Minato back? Kushina shook her head and then nodded, I'm going to bring both Minato and the Kyuubi here. Masahiko sighed deeply, then smiled and nodded, then, you will really have to work harder. I really hope to see that day. He really wanted to see it. It would be really interesting and exciting to see what kind of expression Hiruzen would have when that happens. As for the plot, Naruto would be born smoothly in the end. He can't ask for much more, but for now, one step at a time. Chapter 200, Bracelet of Truth. Half a month has passed after Gensuke's death, and the vacant daimyo position was taken by his son. Masahiko's originally planned selection system eventually ended up being an inheritance system, still, no one objected. Well, it's Gensuke's son, after all. In this way, Kushina's father, Uzumaki Iken, became the second daimyo of the land of whirlpools. And with the help of the elite patrol team, he began to take care of the country's affairs, while Masahiko took his team back to Konoha. It wasn't that he was in a hurry, but after Kushina decided to turn Minato to the land of whirlpools in the future, she was a little eager to confirm with Minato. After all, she knew that Minato was dreaming of becoming the Hokage. Besides, I haven't charged Hiruzen for my newt ancestor yet. Masahiko thought. In Konoha, Masahiko went straight to the Hokage building, while the three went to the Senjo station. They were going to tell Mito about what happened in the Uzumaki clan. Elder Masahiko, you're back. Hiruzen greeted him at the door. Masahiko smiled, you probably knew everything that happened with the Uzumaki, right? Hiruzen nodded, and of course, he knew who was placed in charge of the land of whirlpools. That's good, let's talk money then. Hiruzen was stunned, then nodded repeatedly, and took out 10 million ryo. This a little gift as your allies and friends. Masahiko was stunned for a long time before he finally reacted. He took the money from Hiruzen with one hand and stretched the other, saying, what I wanted is the reward for the task. Hiruzen. He really wanted to ask back his 10 million at that moment, but he didn't dare. Elder Masahiko, about the mission you didn't bring us any live salamanders. I have captured that big salamander, what else do you want? Hiruzen smiled bitterly, the one you caught its species is unknown, and we temporarily can't use it. Masahiko was taken aback, is the meat poisonous? Without waiting for an answer, Masahiko continued, even if there are no live newts, I've collected more herbs than what you've asked. And that big guy, whatever it is, such a huge creature will always be useful. Never heard of bosses? Come on, dude, give me at least 100 ryo, how can you be this cheap? Hiruzen wanted to say, I have already given you 10 million ryo. After hesitating, again and again, he still paid him some money. Anyway, it was just an A-level mission, which worth only 300,000 ryo. Masahiko took the money, smiled with satisfaction, then suddenly started his nonsense, that's right, Hiruzen, I'm that poor, this old man can't even eat ramen anymore. Hi, with this, I'm definitely getting a bowl from Ichiraku Ramen, it's all thanks to you, it's all thanks to you. Masahiko kept saying as he turned around and left the office. Hiruzen could only watch him leave with a wry smile. After leaving, Masahiko found a hidden place to perform the transformation technique, and went to Ichiraku Ramen, only to discover that it was being expanded. On the left of Ichiraku Ramen is Masahiko's Amazon shop, and on the right is the street. If you want to expand, you must be creative. Toki has really made a fortune and built a second-story small Western-style building. Masahiko smiled. Unlike the last time when Toki had to work hard, this time he hired several craftsmen to work. In addition, Masahiko also saw 2 notices about the recruitment of apprentices. It seems that even with all of the family members joining the battlefield, they are still a bit busy. Watching the chaotic ramen shop, and Toki helping here and there, Masahiko went back to his shop without bothering. When he entered his shop, he found a few more small notes in his shop. Masahiko thought it was business again, but after reading it, he found out that they were all left by Obito, basically asking him where he went. This fake identity suddenly disappeared for half a month, but its apprentice still cares. Masahiko smiled, and while slowly cleaned the shop, he took the sealing scroll out of his sleeve. With one kai, a pile of weeds appeared on the ground. It was the paralyzing grass he had collected on the island before. This thing can be used for training, and it's much easier to use than some heavy objects. Masahiko murmured and began to make up a bracelet. The amount he collected was more than enough. Masahiko weaved 20 bracelets in a row, but there were still many left. These should be enough, then with what's left Masahiko frowned, then suddenly smiled and compiled the Lasso of Truth. Note, the Lasso of Truth is a weapon wielded by DC Comics superhero Wonder Woman. Masahiko shook his head feeling unsatisfied, I have to find a way to make its color gold. As he thought, someone came to his door. Master, you're back to provoke. It was Kakashi who came here, but before he could finish speaking, he fell to the ground. Masahiko was startled first, then he realized that he should be paralyzed because Kakashi patted his shoulder while Masahiko was squatting thinking about his Lasso of Truth. It seems that this thing has to be modified before it can be used. Otherwise, wearing a bracelet and touch whoever is now this is something interesting. Masahiko kept pondering, while Kakashi, who fell to the ground on the other side, is crying without tears. The feeling of a stiff body isn't uncomfortable, but he was more worried about what kind of a scheming he walked in. After a while, Masahiko realized that Kakashi was still lying on the ground, so he smiled and asked, "Kakashi, are you not going to school today?" "Oh, yes, you graduated." Kakashi. Masahiko put away the bracelet of truth. Then waited around an hour for Kakashi to be relieved from that stiffness, and stood up slowly. Acting innocent, Masahiko said, "You must remember to rest too, boy. You must have been so tired, you suddenly fainted out in my shop. If your breathing isn't stable, I can call an ambulance for you." Although Kakashi doesn't understand what an ambulance is, he wasn't actually breathing smoothly. "Master, I just... What are you here for?" Masahiko casually changed the topic. Kakashi took a deep breath. "It's just that Obito said he didn't hear any news from you for a while." Masahiko smiled. "Did he ask you to keep an eye on the shop and inform him if I even come back?" "No, it's just that I was worried about you too. And wanted to thank you for the sculpture you gave to me last time." "That's it? Well, thank you for your concern. I just went out and picked a few kinds of grass." Grass picking. Kakashi suddenly remembered what he saw when he first entered the shop, and then thought about how his body was stiff. "Master, is it the paralyzing grass?" Masahiko's face stiffened. He didn't expect Kakashi to actually know such a thing. "Yes, it's the paralyzing grass, which is woven into bracelets. After treatment, it can have a better training effect than lifting heavy objects." Kakashi nodded. "I understand well. Since you're back safely, then I will leave. Come back here in a few days, and I will give you a bracelet." "Thank you, master." Watching Kakashi walk away, Masahiko secretly smiled. Such a good friend. He clearly came here for Obito's sake.